He
had an emergency.
Emergency situation. He may arrive later. We hope he does, but. in the
And
event
Jeff
that he
is out
doesn't,
of town.
And we knew that Jeff Trunzo is not going to be here, but we have a quorum.
Thank you. Verification of notices, Ann?
The agenda was posted on July 1st in City Hall and on the city portal. Notifications were sent out to the subscribers the same day. The public notice for the preliminary review, site plan review application 0618-01 for the property located at 19 Baltimore Avenue was posted in City Hall and on the portal on June 24th. And was sent to the Cape Gazette on June 28th and July 2nd. Publication, Coast Press on July 3rd. Delaware State News on June 26th and June 27th. Signage was posted on the property and mailing was sent out to the property owners within 200 feet.
Thank you. Thank you very much. In spite of what it says, we have no minutes to approve. Okay, we'll catch up on those later. And no correspondence that I know of? No. Just for your edification, attached to the package today is a hard copy of that journal on ethics in the Planning Commission, which I think I sent electronically to you guys. It's worth a read if you haven't read it yet, and there's some good stuff in there. So, which leads us to old business and a preliminary review of site plan review application number 0618-01 for the property located at 19 Baltimore Avenue on lots numbers 17, 19, and 21, block Baltimore Avenue. The preliminary review of the site plan has been requested by Vince Robertson, Esquire, on behalf of Ronald Langford of Langford Properties, LLC, owner of the property. And we are in a preliminary review today. So let me give some background, Vince, before we start. 23632, this is for everybody's edification, I guess, and our own. The purpose of the preliminary review meeting, well, first of all, there is a pre-process that has gone on in which the building inspector and the various departments within the city have reviewed this application for things that are pertinent to their areas of expertise and concern. There has been a couple, or at least two, I think, sketch reviews, as I recall. Is it one or two? Two, I think. Yeah. Two, I believe. And so we're at a point, the preliminary review, the site plan shall be forwarded to the Planning Commission following the department review and available to the commissioners at least 28 days before a regular meeting of the Planning Commission, and shall be placed on the next available Planning Commission agenda for preliminary review, and that's where we are today. We're bending a little bit in that the Planning Commission did not get a full 28-day advance, but we decided to bend the rules once to keep peace in the house, I think, because I think it's appropriate. But it will not happen again, okay? I hope. The purpose of the preliminary review meeting is to receive preliminary input from the city officials, nearby property owners, and the public. And two, to determine this, I'm reading from 23632G. Item 2, to determine whether additional information is needed from the applicant or others, and whether there are legal or factual issues that need further clarification prior to the final action of the Planning Commission at a subsequent meeting. So basically, we need to hear from the building inspector and with respect to the city review. There is also, I guess, let's maybe have that review first, and then I will review or bring forth the results of the Board of Adjustment meeting, their actions that took place, I believe, in a May meeting, as I recall, or March meeting, I think it was a March. It was a March meeting, but was finally published I believe, the 28th of June. And so there are things that impact this application relative to going forward. So I think the first thing probably is to hear from the building inspector, and let's hear what the city thinks of this project. Okay?
Good afternoon, Chairman Mellon and members of the,
You want to speak up?
good afternoon, Chairman Mellon and members of the Planning Commission. The Department of Building and Licenses have had an opportunity to review this application, and as such has generated, which I will say this format will significantly change moving forward in the response that I prepare for this meeting, which basically enumerated the section, but it didn't give you much information by attaching what specific provisions of 23632 was applicable. In that summary, I indicated which items were satisfied in the preliminary plan that was submitted and those that would require additional information. The applicant on July 3rd provided to my attention the response to the preliminary site plan, and they have addressed, I will say, of the items that were still outstanding, addressed, I will say, a good 95, 99%. There is still one matter that is outstanding, in my opinion, and it has been a prolonged matter, and that is the issue of the parapet wall. It has been raised, that I have recorded five consecutive times, and the parapet wall is basically an extension of the building. Before, the parapet wall was 8 foot high. It has been reduced to 3.5. So what you're seeing is a parapet wall with a capping, three sides of the building, and the rear portion of the building has what they have indicated to be a handrail. Now, the parapet wall adds additional height to the building, and that can be found under the definition of height. So if you go to that definition, it'll tell you you include the parapet wall to add to the height. The Board of Adjustment granted the variance for a height of 42. The parapet wall adds another 3.5 feet. And any increase in that height violates the variance of what was granted by the Board of Adjustment. Otherwise, the department have responded to the other items. Parking division indicated that they appear will have an increase in parking spaces with the new construction. They propose to use some of those spaces that are relocated to possibly scooters. They asked the applicant when they move forward with the construction and those parking spaces that have to be eliminated, that they pick up the tab for that period of time that the city will lose revenue. The police department did not at this time foresee any major issues with the development of the site, and I believe the matters with the stormwater management have been in discussion with the Public Works Department. And that's what I have.
The police department did comment, as I recall, that they did not propose putting a light in. They said that there will be increased traffic,
That's correct.
as I recall. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And that they did not foresee putting a light or any changing to the stoppage at the intersection of Baltimore and First.
First, correct.
Is that correct?
That's correct.
Any other things?
That's all I have, sir.
Okay. in the opinion, is it, of the city, is it your opinion that we're, except for the question of the parapet wall, that we're prepared to go forward to a,
Under the existing conditions, yes.
okay, thank you. Any questions or discussions so far? Let me, before we turn it over to Vince, let me sort of summarize, and this is more of a question of, see if my understanding of the Board of Adjustment rulings jibe with what you think the Board of Adjustment rulings were. My understanding is that you went before the Board of Adjustment and you challenged some of the positions that the building inspector had taken relative to FAR, relative to not height. You weren't questioning height, as I recall at that time.
It was number of stories,
It was the number of stories, 4 versus 5 versus 4.
how you calculated them.
How you calculate them, whether the sub-floor or the first floor, which is somewhat sub, should count or not count, whether parking should count or not count. And my understanding is that the Board of Adjustment treated these in a manner by first supporting the building inspector on his positions.
Because it was, just to clarify, there was an appeal and variances requested simultaneously.
Yeah, but the first thing was on the appeal, the Board of Adjustment actually supported the building inspector, as I recall. In a vote of 3-1, the motion carried to uphold the building inspector's determination that the proposed structure violates the prohibition against more than 4 floors. So he was correct in that, but then you asked for a variance. Okay. Similarly, the board was unanimous in its determination that the required parking area, albeit below ground, and the patio overhang area are commercial amenities subject to the inclusion in the FAR calculation. You would ask that they not be included, and the Board of Adjustment said, no, they should be included.
On the appeal, right.
On the appeal, okay. Which leaves the code, the existing code, standing so far, okay? And then you asked for variances you highlighted the actual square feet that on the various floors, and a variance was granted to the commercial nature of the zone and the presence of the businesses, the hotel, and the legal nonconforming structures in the area. The lack of harm to neighboring properties and applicants' effort to comply with the CDP while constructing a hotel. And this is not dominated visually by the presence of on-site parking. So the variance was granted for that. And then they approved a motion to deny the FAR variances for basically items B through D, which was calculations for the various floors. So they basically supported the building inspector on that one.
Yeah, I think there was one where there was a clarification on the square footage. but-
There was a difference in
opinion.
calculation,
Yeah, right.
and it was clarified. But they still denied doing away with those as had been requested. And then finally, they did grant a variance, okay, for the proposed hotel consisting of 5 floors, not exceeding the overall height limitation of 42 feet. Is that correct?
Right, but that's still subject to the code on certain things that can exceed 42 feet, but right.
Okay. So,
Because it was mainly the 5 stories. It wasn't so much the 42 feet,
Yeah.
but it was the clarifying and allowing them to go to 40.
Yep.
As
Okay.
long as he stayed
So-
under that code.
so
of 5.
we agree on,
Yeah, and I think Mr. Molina agrees with all that too, I believe.
yep, okay, all right.
That's sort of where we are today.
So no one has changed the way the code actually states. Its variances have been granted for excesses, basically in FAR and related to the parking garage.
Correct.
That parking will not be, in this case, parking will not be included in the calculation of the FAR as long as it is below ground level.
Correct.
Okay. Is that
I think
We
so,
agree?
yeah. I believe so, yes.
Okay. Is there any,
Shocking.
well, I just want to make sure that we're all on the same
So we
page.
all just call it a day and leave?
Okay. We'll let you address
Okay.
any particular issues. By the way, there is an error, I think, on your new drawing. There's a note which refers to 19, I believe, and it should refer to 18, I believe.
Okay.
That's just a minor, this is on this big drawing that you
Also,
submitted.
one other minor thing on the big drawing is it says C1, it's not, it's C3.
Agree. I picked that up today, actually, yeah, so.
Yeah, and I think the note, somewhere there's a note 19, which relates to the parking spaces that are allocated to the people across the street
Right.
in the condominiums.
No, that's up here in 15. Provided for celebration condos,
What's 18?
parking spaces shall be reserved and dedicated to use of celebration, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and I think on the drawing it says 19.
Okay.
For that, that needs to be correct.
Okay.
Okay, go.
I'm going to, well, for the record, Vince Robertson with Parkowski, Girk, and Swayze on behalf of Langford Properties LLC. It is lots 17, 19, and 21 Baltimore Avenue, which, as we talked about, is a 5-story hotel.
You want to move your mic up?
Oh,
a
sure.
little bit, so.
I know I'm tall. I'll shrink. So I just want to give a little bit of the background, just for the public and for you all, sort of where this started. As we've had preliminary, reviews, but and I won't be lengthy, and this isn't a long presentation, but we started sort of looking at the goals of the comprehensive development plan, and we went through this at length with the Board of Adjustment. But I just want to sort of reiterate that to you all, so you know sort of the foundation of how this came about. In the city's CDP, one of the things that's actually bold and stated over and over again is the city's desire to increase the commercial viability and attractiveness of Wilmington and Baltimore Avenues and First Street. And that was on page 16 and 75 of the plan. The current plan also recognized that the 96 and 2004 CDP spelled out the reconstruction of Rehoboth Avenue as a major commercial revitalization opportunity, and suggested that more attention be given to Baltimore and Wilmington Avenues. It's referenced in the 2010 plan. There was even workshops in 2009 to look at how we can revitalize Baltimore and Wilmington. The plan also talked about the redevelopment of these properties being an opportunity that the city should look to. And then sort of concluded that in cooperation with Main Street and the Chamber of Commerce, the city will encourage and assist interested owners in the creative redevelopment of properties on Rehoboth Avenue and other commercial areas. And that's on page 76 of the plan. Everybody I think here knows that's really happened on Wilmington Avenue, particularly the first block of Baltimore Avenue. That's kind of been somewhat stagnant for years. Mr. Langford's really done a lot for that with the Atlantic Sands. He's he purchased the church and has redeveloped that. And this is sort of the next piece of that puzzle. As Mr. Mellon talked about, we've had multiple meetings with the city. That includes meetings with you all, certainly the meeting with the Board of Adjustment. We've even had meetings with Mr. Molina and staff and city administration trying to work things out so we get to where we are and everybody's on the same page with things. The Board of Adjustment meeting was a spirited one, but we came through with that, with the decisions, and that's what we're dealing with today. And as Mr. Molina stated, he had his July 12th report. July 12th report. Although that seems like that should have been June 12th, because our response was July 3rd. And what we wanted to do is to keep things moving, and I appreciate the Commission's willingness to do this. I think, as Mr. Molina said, most of the items that he addressed were not substantive. They were, add the zoning of the adjacent properties, that sort of thing. The substance of the plan didn't change, but rather than add steps to the process, we just wanted to get that site plan to you all at that point. So with that, I just want to go through a quick PowerPoint, just sort of showing you what we're dealing with. So that is the two lots. That's lots 17 and 19. Right now, it's a vacant parking lot. Certainly not what the plan wanted for Baltimore Avenue. There's a couple things that are significant on this. One is that you can see there's two, it looks like each of those are two parking spaces for each entrance. Those will be eliminated because there's going to be a shared entrance through the entrance to the Atlantic Sands and interconnectivity with the Atlantic Sands. So that's 2 spaces that'll be returned to revenue for the city for parking, for on-street parking. The other thing is kind of in terms of the CDP, it eliminates that view, and every property owner has the right to do what they want with their property within the code, but, there's 2 garages there. One of them, you can't really see it, but the one on the right, I went by there today, the roof's caving in. That's the view you get from Baltimore Avenue if you're driving up there, is the backside of a garage that really needs some maintenance. The other property is what I always refer to as the camel's hump. I guess I go back far enough to think of it that way, but it's Jam. That's a property that is 21 Baltimore Avenue. It's one that's frankly probably exceeded its useful life as a commercial business. It's an old beach house that's been added onto over the years. You can see the ductwork going up the side of it right now. One of the things that's not necessarily visible easily on this is where the trash cans are. That's also an on-street parking space that's not usable. There's a driveway. Right now it looks like it's got seating in that driveway area, but that's not somewhere that the public can park in. That also would be returned to either scooter parking like we talked about or another revenue-generating parking space for the city. So when we went through the plan, one of the things, recognizing that this is commercial that abuts residential properties, we wanted to mitigate, knowing what the code allows, we could build right up to the property lines. This is actually the back of Jam or the Camel's Hump, and that fence on the right is basically the property line. By code in commercial, we could go right up to that. You could literally, develop this property with a wall 42 feet high right there. If you were doing a hotel, you could do a wall with balconies and hotel rooms that look in everybody's backyard. And that's what we wanted to avoid. And you can kind of see, that's a close-up of it. I don't think anybody likes how that would look between their residential property and where their commercial property is. And, these photos were taken at the time of the Board of Adjustment hearing, so I don't know that that's the same today, but visually that's the closeness we're talking about between residential and commercial. This is a picture we used for the Board of Adjustment. And I just wanted to point it out. This is the Admiral on Baltimore. I realized today when I went by, it's since been painted. It's no longer yellow. It's sort of gray and white. But when we first started this process, that was kind of the design we were trying to avoid. I'll be honest. And Mr. Langford brought the original picture, which I think some folks have seen. I'm just going to hold it up, sort of Vanna White style here. But we originally had it so that there was a porch across the front, and then the rooms were stepped back from that, and then the top rooms are stepped back from that. And it gave sort of more of a, there was some depth to it, I guess. And the porch frontage gave it the look of like the old Carlton Hotel or, the Royalton where the Royal Treat is with that porch look. That's where we started about a year ago. And where we are today is a little bit closer to that, unfortunately, but we still tried to break it up some. So that's a depiction of the plan with the exception of the Atlantic Crown sign on top. But that's a depiction of the plan today that Mr. Molina has reviewed. So that's compliant with everything in code, plus the Board of Adjustments variances that were granted. We did break it up with those balconies, so it's not a one single wall across the front, so that's visible. You can see the Jam restaurant's going to be relocated down at street level, so that'll be a little bit more inviting as far as what street level looks like with the entrance there on the right. And you can see the scooter parking. The street actually is a photograph of the existing street. There'll be spaces there. They're not lined because it's the way it exists now. So with that, that sort of shows the parapeted issue. You see at the top, that's that wall above the top floor where the sign is, and just disregard the sign.
Is that the brown?
Yeah, that's the brown part at top. So so there's history on that, and I'm confident we can get this worked out. But there's a couple things in the code that deal with parapets and height, and particularly how you deal with HVAC equipment. So the code in section 270.20 talks about, it lists some things and talks about architectural embellishments and not for occupancy or storage may be erected to a height in excess of that authorized in the subsection. So it gives you the ability to do architectural embellishments. The other thing is, in that same section, it talks about, you can have HVAC equipment, but they have to be enclosed so as to be obscured from view. And we've had meetings about this, as Mr. Molina talked about, and we've had discussions with him about it. We went from it doesn't show up that great, but the parapet with the railings, with the mansard roof, at the original part of it. We even had a discussion up in the caucus room where we looked over, and this is with staff, where we looked over at the fire company who has all their HVAC equipment showing, and the city's response was, well, we don't want it to look like that. No offense to the fire company, but you see all the mechanical stuff sitting on top of the building. So however we do it, the idea is to screen that HVAC equipment, which the code says you have to do. Whether, frankly, at this point, whether it's going back to the original design with the mansard and the railings, the original design with the mansard, the railings, and the parapet, or the way it's shown there, we want to get it done. The only thing I would say with Mr. Molina, and maybe it was a miscommunication, was we had a meeting in October talking about all this. This is when we looked at the caucus room looking across the fire company. And there were sort of two parts to it. One was the sign and one was the parapet. I know we talked about taking the sign off because there's code requirements about the sign. We may have to deal with that separately if we deal with it at all, but meaning Board of Adjustment. But we thought that the sign was resolved and the parapet was okay, and it didn't show up in Mr. Molina's report following that meeting. I know Mr. Molina has a different interpretation of that. My point being is it's something we can get worked out, whether it's the mansard and the railing, whether the city seems to say is okay, or whether it's the parapet, which we thought was okay, which is maybe not. We just want to get through that and get to final and move forward.
Is what's shown a 6-foot or 7-foot
That's
parapet?
the 3.5 foot, I believe, that Mr. Molina talked about in his report.
So this would bring the height to 45 and a half feet?
Right, but you can go 42 plus that according to the code. Because remember, it's 42 feet, but you can do HVAC devices which are to be enclosed, or 42 feet plus the dome spire, cupolas, belfry, and architectural embellishments. So you're not limited to 42 feet for those things. You're limited to 42 feet for structure. You can go up above that for these
How
other
much of the actual area of the roof is occupied by HVAC? In other words, is the parapet significantly larger than is needed to screen?
Bear with me, Mr.
By the way, this is not meant to solve problems nor to discuss them. It's really to make sure that we have the right amount of information to go
Right.
forward to a public meeting. So, if we don't have the answer to that, we don't have to engineer it today, but
No, well, and this is actually the roof design of it, and you can see that it shows the HVAC condensing units all across the top, with the exception of the area where the elevator towers are. So, anyhow, what I don't want to, I understand what you're saying, Mr. Mellon, but I also don't want to, have any loose ends if we could get that resolved. That's all.
Are you saying it's an embellishment? Are you saying it's a screen or both?
I think it's both, so, and I understand.
How
what
is
Mr.
it an embellishment? It's not a dome, spire, cupola, pinnacle?
Well, because it says a dome spire, cupola, belfry, chimney, or pinnacle serving as an architectural embellishment. I think those are just examples, not for an all-inclusive list. But then on note 2, it does talk about the HVAC
Right.
to be enclosed. I think it's either, but I think it's clearly the HVAC at a minimum to enclose it. And that was the direction we got from the city in the meetings we had with the city. No matter what you do, you got to enclose those. If you want something that looks nice, that encloses those. And like I said, we can go back to the mansard and the railings. I don't want to get too hung up on that.
do you have a
That's
picture of that?
all. Yeah, so it's the end parts on this. So that's the parapet, but this would be the mansard railing. So we could just do parapet and their railing. Well, since there's the thing is the HVAC is behind where that is also. So
And it's only blocking on the street side, it's not blocking on the backside?
my understanding that there's blocking all the way around, but I can clarify
Three
that.
I thought there was there's
I beg your pardon?
three
Three
sides.
sides.
Because on the back has a railing, you said.
The back is a railing.
Yeah.
So what does this do to the,
It's not enclosed from the
Well,
back?
from my perspective is, is that I'm looking at the definition of height, and it's specifically distinguished from those items that are permitted to be built under section 27020, in terms of those architectural embellishment. A parapet wall does not fall into that category.
I would agree with that.
What is this 6-foot-high screening enclosure that's shown on the plan that's on the back of the HVAC units?
I think that is the back side of it that Mr. Molina was talking about.
The handrail, what you see
Yeah,
is the handrail.
No, it says, right here, it says 6-foot-high screen
Yeah, I
enclosure.
see.
It looks like an enclosure behind the HVAC units.
I'm not sure about that, but we can clarify that for final.
Because it sounds like the issue of the, I mean, the parapet, Mr. Molina is saying is an extension of the front wall, basically, and therefore it's included in height. That if it was 12 inches back, it would be an HVAC enclosure. It seems like it's one and the same. It just happens to be a component of the front wall.
Which, we're just, at this point, if you say mansard and railings, we're fine with that. And then it's not the extension of the front wall, like you said.
Does that mean it's not screened from the back if there's a handrail there?
There's the handrail that's like the front, and it's a handrail that's, it's got the post in it, so it breaks it up. It's, yeah,
Okay. But it's still, does it still screen it from the back?
that's my understanding, yeah.
Okay.
I guess I'd just like to interject that I think the idea, I mean, I'm just trying to like reduce this to what are we concerned about? And obviously with height is massing and, obscuring view and obscuring sunlight and things like that. And I guess that's sort of the main concern, or I think, of what we're dealing with. But I'm just by looking at that, your secondary image of the sort of parapet wall across the front of it, that does make the front of it more imposing, I guess. And I guess if there is another alternative, and I'm just thinking in terms of, I'm looking at this, that there would be a means of basically screening that, but not having it right on the the facade of the building, that it could be set back possibly, which I think the mansard thing seemed to accomplish or something like that. So, and in that way, it's set back. It's not going to look, even if it's as high as it would be on the front, it's not going to appear that way, because it's set back. So it kind of gives the impression that it's not quite as high as it is, And
Breaks it up visually, I
yeah, right. Just breaking it up visually, but by setting it back or whatever. So I don't know if that is a consideration or not. I don't know.
Hey, Gene, why don't you see if you can use a mic or use down? You're welcome, sir.
I'm Gene Langford. I'm trying to get this project done.
Yeah.
And I would just make one comment about that. This parapet is really an architectural embellishment, and it's trying to help the design of the building. There's no, in addition to the embellishment, it does help to break up that straight roof line. There's no trick to it at all. We're not trying to gain any living space or whatever.
Right.
It's strictly an architectural embellishment. So I think you need to, in your own mind, decide what are architectural embellishments. And there's 2 or 3 examples in the code, but this particular one is not cited as an example. And because it's not cited as an example, Dom, I guess, had no alternative but to say, well, it's not mentioned, so it must not be an architectural embellishment. But to me, and I hope to all common sense people, that this would make perfect sense. This would be an architectural embellishment. In addition to that, it does serve as the screen. Thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman? Yeah, I agree, Vince, with everything that you've just quoted except for one item. And I think your references to the CDP were completely appropriate. And what you're attempting to do is to do that. But referring to Bunky's observation and actually disagreeing a bit with Mr. Langford in terms of what's an embellishment, that's sort of the crux of the issue of when you do a design. part of the design problem you have is because of the design that you selected in terms of its height and the additional floor that you have. And that's your full right to do that, because you're the one that's taking the financial risk to do it. And if the hotel was only 4 floors as opposed to 5, you wouldn't have an issue here. But it is. And since it is, you have an issue. And the dialogue has become one of, is it embellishment? Is it a parapet? Is it whatever, regardless of what it is in terms of the mass of the facility itself and the livability of the community, which is what the intent of the comprehensive development plan is. And I don't have an answer. I don't have a conclusion, but it does raise the issue. You have an issue, even though you addressed all the other things, and I agree with it. The problem that you're discussing right now is of your own making, because you elected to construct a facility that is larger than what the current code permits, and you got variances, which I think were appropriate, to rectify some situations. The problem now with regard to its absolute height, because of that selection, in essence, you're putting 2 pounds of peanut butter in a 1 pound jar. And that's resulting in the decisions that you needed to make. Now, the hotel may not be viable if it wasn't the number of floors that it is, and I can't address that. But that's the basic issue here in terms of the context of the comprehensive development plan, revitalizing the area, but the sense of place that's created and the nature of what it does to the scope of the area. And I don't have an answer to that. It is an issue and a problem, and I'm not sure how we get to a solution yet.
Well,
Mr. Langford, just real quick, if I could just respond. I want everybody to keep in mind that the variances were for the number of floors, not the height. We're still at 42 feet. So you said, 10 pounds of sugar in a 5-pound bag. It's 10 pounds of sugar in a 10-pound bag. I mean,
Right, but the
you could
result,
build one
you
story
could
that's
even
42 feet.
disregard what I said in that sense. I'm not challenging it. It's that the spatial interpretation of what the resultant is, and there are certain financial realities that have to be dealt with because you're the one taking the moral hazard and the risk to build this. But then it's also within the context of the whole community and the comprehensive development plan. And it creates a dilemma. I'm conflicted because I don't know what the hell the right answer is at the moment.
well, I have 2 points. 2 points there I was making. That is, the Board of Adjustment did hang their hat on the fact that the building is 42 feet high.
Right.
And then you get into architectural embellishments. And I think the code, Dom can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the code does say as long as it's under 50 feet. And this started out, I think, at 8 feet. I think we got it down to 6 feet now. So it does come under that category of architectural embellishment. And the building
plan that
is
was
just
presented?
42 feet.
Is this the plan that was presented to the Board of Adjustment when they denied the height?
No, because it was, at that point, this plan is reactionary to that Board of Adjustment's decision. We didn't have this plan because we didn't have the Board of Adjustment's decision to
But-
create it from.
But there was still a parapet in what we presented to the board, even if it wasn't this exact
Yeah,
one.
no, there was, 'cause it was this one. This was
Yeah, right.
essentially the plan, right? It
So,
wasn't the full parapet.
so they denied the height
No,
addition.
No.
that wasn't even an issue at the Board of
There
Adjustment.
wasn't a question for them.
Because
Okay.
remember, we're at 42 feet. We're
Right, yeah.
legal to the height
right, okay.
in all respects.
Dom, can I ask Dom, the code does allow for architectural embellishments, is that correct? Could you tell us the limits of what the height allowances would be in excess of the 42 feet for the embellishments that are allowed within the code?
Yes, it does. Under Section 270-20, the embellishments that are permitted under code is a dome, spire, cupola, belfry, chimney, and pinnacle. And they can not be more than 10% of the building, of the aggregate basis of the such structure, or the total height of the building cannot exceed 50 feet.
Cannot exceed 50 feet, and they cannot exceed what percentage of the area?
10%.
10%
Of the ground floor area.
of the ground floor area.
So we're way under that.
I guess, our job today is not to solve this problem.
Right,
is
and
it?
we can certainly talk to the staff about that.
Yeah, it seems to me that what, you've heard the planning commission, its concern over mass. The question is, even if it were an embellishment, is what can be done architecturally to perhaps reduce the mass and stay within the guidelines, if you like, of architectural embellishments, and something that would be pleasing to the building and.
Still meet your needs.
And still meet the needs. So we need to, I think, look at that rather than make a decision on this particular design. And you've got some time to hopefully do that.
Yeah, no, understood.
That seems to me fair.
Well, I think what he'd like to do, just, I'll sort of wrap up, the rest of this, we just had in case there was conversation on it. These are just what you all have. So that's the site plan, the elevations, or excuse me, the elevations. This is the site plan that was submitted on July 3rd, which responds to Mr. Molina's comments. As I mentioned, it added clarification about things that he listed, like the dumpster enclosure. We showed that. There are things on there like the zoning of the other properties, but it's the same as what came out originally. So I'm not going to go through all these because you have them. What I'll conclude, and certainly we're going to hear from the public, but what I'll conclude with is, I think the issues that we talked about that Mr. Molina and you raised some questions on the site plan, they're minor enough at this point. I don't want to characterize them as not being important, but they're not earth-shattering either, where what we'd like to do is work with staff and just come back at that stage with resolutions for final, if that.
I would urge that. One thing that you might want to also discuss, you talked about lighting, and I think somewhere there's a note, one of the notes says that the lighting will be attached to the building, et cetera, something to that effect.
Right, that's correct.
But it does not specifically address the issue of essentially making the lighting
Like downward screened or.
not obtrusive
Yeah.
to the people that live behind. There's probably nothing worse than looking out of a window of a home or whatever it is and seeing a bright light glaring at you. So there certainly are lighting that would allow for essentially down throwing of lighting or up throw, essentially to give you the ground lighting that's needed for safety and that, but yet not produce a glare. And so we'd like to, if it isn't addressed, to address that.
Yeah, we certainly accommodate. One other point too, Mr. Mellon, is that we've told Dom, this will not be a sign as shown on that, there'll be no lettering there. So that go confusing with the sign versus the parapet.
Yeah, I would say, and I hope I'm speaking for the other people, that the bulkiness of the parapet is a concern. And so anything that can be done architecturally that stays within the guidelines of the current code, in the sense of the current code, and yet reduces the bulk, would be the kind of thing that you'd want to do. And it should, I think you've got enough time to work on that so that we theoretically could go forward.
Yeah, well, I think we should go forward with it. I mean, my only comment about and I don't think they're examples. It doesn't say such as. It actually names off all the things that are considered architectural embellishments. But what they have in common, in my mind, is that they're all, kind of vertical. And it implies dome, spire, cupola, belfry, chimney, or pinnacle, that they're in one spot, that they're not across the entire top. So where the parapet is more of a wall. And I guess that would be the distinction to me. The other, I'm glad you brought up about lighting, because in the response to Dom's report, it says lighting will be for off-street parking and accomplished with the use of wall packs. Is there also lighting at the top of the building? Because I think that's what he was referring to with shining on the neighbors. So to the extent that there's lighting on the top, that would have to be.
I don't believe that there is on the top.
Okay.
yeah.
I think it's just one of those things that you have to, your architect basically has to choose the right
Right.
thing and be thinking about the impact on other people as opposed to just
No,
the lighting
absolutely.
required for safety.
And those are the kind of details, too, that I'm sure Mr. Molina is going to look at when we go through the actual building plan reviews, too. He's going to take a look at that.
Do you think you can accomplish these in the time period that is,
I think, yeah.
so that we,
Back to my point with Mr. Molina on this, I don't want to suggest that we're in an argument over the parapet. I think there's just we've been missing signals on it along the way, so. Yeah, no, I think.
Tom, do you think we've got an area to work with?
I mean, it's in the code, we just follow the code.
Okay. Yeah, but I think, I'm not saying that we have to change the code, but there is a balance between architectural aesthetics and the practicality of what needs to be
I
accomplished.
understand that, Mr. Millen, but I don't believe I have the authority to make that distinction.
Okay,
To make the distinction between whether part of a parapet wall is an embellishment or not, I think that's within the realm of the Board of Adjustment.
okay, but they have some architectural, they have some options that they can look at, or
Sure,
they're
and,
suggesting that.
and that can be considered under the scheme of 27020.
Well, we've had meetings on this, and the city was directed that, staff, that we need to screen those HVAC units, and that this accomplishes that. With this meaning the parapet or the mansard or the railings. What I don't want to backtrack on this, where now we're dealing with, okay, there's boxes on the roof that literally just screen the HVAC, because that is not the direction we got from the city.
Understood.
So, yeah, just so we're clear on that going forward, so we have some understanding. Yeah, okay.
Let's not continue that part of the discussion anymore. I think that's something that.
That's
staff and the
design.
applicant, We can bring you
That's-
something that works that part of it out. I think.
Audience,
Yeah, that concludes what I had to say, so thank you.
thank you, Vince, and Mr. Langford. Do we have any comments from the public on this, any of these issues? Yes, would you step up to the mic and,
Thank
name and
Yes.
address and?
thank you. I'm Cameron McTavish, architect of 10, 12, and 14 Maryland Avenue. And I'm representing the Barnes family and the Carroll family also that live on Maryland Avenue and whose properties abut the project site. So just in consideration of everything that's been said and approaching it with a good spirit, I think if you consider the top as a balustrade, that might give you a way around this. And maybe consider setting it back a little bit. You might still gain the screening that you need from the mechanical. And also wanted to emphasize the impact of lighting in the parking level that comes right over the 6-foot fence at the rear of the Barnes property, right into their house. And it's very bright. It's like that Seinfeld where Kramer is frying in the neon light. Not to make joke of it, but you know, it's a very, very bright light that impacts the house. So that would be appreciated, to be sensitive about that. And also the noise. So I think the screening you're talking about is important, Vince. We appreciate that. And Mr. Langford, consider not just visual screening, but acoustic screening also. The family has been on the property since 1881, and I haven't been around that long, but I can remember hearing the ocean while sitting on the porch. Well, we don't anymore. Now we just hear air conditioning from the porch. So that would be appreciated too, to consider the sound of that. And I in my reading of the code, which I had to do as the architect for our client's project, had to follow it and understand it. I read it the same way that Mr. Molina does, where a parapet is clearly included in the height. It's named and included. It's in the 42 feet, including the parapet. And that's not the way it is on the current plan. The parapet is above the 42-foot height. So I happen to agree with his interpretation. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Going once? Oh, yes, I'm sorry. Yes.
Very quickly, I'm William Barnes. We have.
An
again-
address, please?
Excuse me?
Address, location.
10, 12, and 14 Maryland Avenue.
Thank you.
And what Cameron had said, truly, we want the issues of noise, light encroachment, and odor dealt with. And truly, in the design, they're starting to accommodate for that, and we appreciate that. Because I think that those are the things that concern us. And as long as they're taken into consideration, you know, with the architecture of this, we would appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Going once? Going twice? The public comment portion is closed. Vince, let me ask a question. Of course, the site plan will require a buffer of some sort between the commercial district and the residential district. There has to be, the code requires that. My question is, how are you going to handle that? Is it going to be plantings? Is it going to be trees?
That's not an issue that Mr. Molina has raised up to this point.
It's required, though. It is required.
All right, we'll take a look at that with him.
Okay. The way it was, okay, you need to take a look at that. Obviously, let me just make an absurd statement. The planting of 1 foot high or 2 foot high bushes does not constitute a barrier. Okay. So the intent of the barrier is to demarc and give some isolation between a commercial district and a residential district. And that is required in the code. So we'd be prepared to address that if you would. Okay. Again, we'll open it up again. Yeah.
Just a quick comment on that. The code says that we can only put a fence in to 6 feet. If we could, between the residential and commercial properties, be able to elevate a fence up to 8 feet or whatever again, the board would like to allow us, that might help with that situation. It might help with the light encroachment, parking, again, the noise that's going to be incurred from vehicles that are coming through, because truly, he's going to have access with trucks backing up and coming through the properties. If we could have, again, just higher fencing and get a variance on that fencing height.
Okay. There are various ways to obviously create that barrier.
Thank you
Let's
very-
give them a chance to take a look at that.
Thank you.
Yeah, and again, just looking ahead, recognize that the main purpose of the site plan review, when we get to it, is to look at the impact of a project related on the neighboring areas. That's really, if you look at all of the questions, the main portion of the site plan review is to look at that impact. So
And you're saying that would be done at the preliminary, not today, but at the preliminary?
at the preliminary review, yeah.
The final review.
Or at the final
This
review.
is the preliminary.
This is the preliminary, at the public hearing. Yep, so
The
please.
idea today, that's why we wanted feedback, is to understand concerns from folks so that new things don't come up.
But my question is, we're not going to go down the entire list today of
No.
everything.
Okay.
Well, we're not, but I think between Mr. Molina, his report, and
Your comments.
our comments, I mean, the goal of today is to make sure there's not any outstanding issues so that we don't get surprised for us or for you all at the final review. I don't think there are any except for what we talked about.
Yeah, I think we will want more information on specifics. For instance, the lighting. You know, if the architect can give us some of that insight, or at least we certainly have the option, the planning commission has the option to impose conditions. Okay, so depending on what you tell us and what's in the design, you know, the planning commission may impose certain conditions, either directly related to the existing questions or others that may come up. So be prepared.
That was done for the school project. There was a condition on the intensity of the lighting.
Yeah.
Oh, no, yeah, understood. I totally understand that completely. You know, I think you're going to condition it to do what we were going to do anyway, so we can add a note to that on the plan.
Yep.
You know, without any
Dave,
issues.
can
So.
Vince, I'd like to make one other observation in light of all that you've done, which I would commend in terms of the comprehensive development plan. But vis-a-vis my comments, within the context of the law and the variances that you have, and my references and Bunky's in terms of mass and image, architecturally, you can do things that may not affect your mass at all, but to someone looking at it would go, really, that's 45 feet? Or 42 feet? And they wouldn't sense that. And that's really something that's very important when you do, from an urban planning standpoint, when you do urban design, where you incorporate things, where you create an image where you're not really aware of what's actually happening and you feel better about it. But yet the mass doesn't change at all. And
Well,
so you can fit context in.
I'll put my plug in on this, and has really nothing to do directly with this application. To answer your question on that, the city's constrained developers by the FAR. I mean, we came in with a plan that we had a first floor that was stepped back with a mansard roof to another floor, which is stepped back with another floor. And when you start having roofs and then they cover things with floor area and you have balconies, all that counts against FAR. And when you have architectural things that break up a building that count towards FAR, they start coming out. You don't have any choice. I mean, so I don't disagree with you at all, but the way the city's code has been worked, particularly on commercial buildings, it happens some on residential, but on commercial buildings, you lose a lot of the ability to do that there's not a lot of flexibility in the code for things.
That's why we're going through the CDP.
Yeah, no, I promote that 100%, so.
And one very important issue, speaking for all the men in here, you have 2 ladies' rooms in the lobby level and no men's room.
Point, I'm gonna make a note of that. Add men's room.
And with that comment, I'll entertain a motion. If there's no other comments or discussion, I'll entertain a motion to move this application forward to a public hearing.
So moved.
Seconded.
Want to put some words in there?
What David said.
Move to set a public hearing for the site plan review of the Langford Hotel.
Thank you.
And we'll work with Ann to get that scheduled.
Seconded? It has been
Mike
seconded?
Mike seconded.
Okay, there's been a motion to move the site plan for the Langford Properties Hotel forward to a public hearing. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Chair votes aye, and we should try and schedule this for next month.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
And we'll
Thank you,
work
Vince.
diligently.
Please, and I think to the degree that you can, if there is a great aha that comes out of this in terms of design, the earlier that you can tell the planning commission what these things are, probably the better off we are.
No, understood.
Okay.
And the public as well.
Yeah. Thank you, Vince.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Langford, thank you.
Then it would be at the next meeting.
Yeah. Okay. Moving forward, or backward, as the case may be.
You want to take a 5-minute? We don't really need to take a 5-minute break. It's only 2 o'clock.
5-minute break?
If you want to. I mean, people are gathering.
We'll take a 5-minute break. All right? Sell your house yet there, Mr. Paul?
Sell your house yet?
Nope. You want it?
Got any bids? Got anybody? Nobody coming to see it?
People are coming to see it, but
That's good.
nobody's whipped out a check yet.
It'll happen.
Yep.
It'll happen.
Can't get in till October anyway. I can't.
I think they can, I think they can. Architectural.
The architectural way to do it.
Sure. we've lost some people, I guess. Okay. Item B, continuation of the sketch plan review for the proposed Belhaven Hotel properties located at 2 Rehoboth Avenue, lots numbers 2, 4, 6, 17, and 18, Block Rehoboth, and lots number 3, 5, 7, and 9, Block Wilmington. The property is owned by the Papa John family and will be represented by
Alex, Papa
Alex.
John, and
Alex,
Peter,
Papa
and
John.
Susan, and
and Peter.
hopefully
and,
Ben Seidel's coming.
He's right there.
And Susan. Where's Susan?
Hey, I'm sorry, man.
The whole crew is here.
Whole gang's
Okay.
here,
Yeah.
except your
Whole
dad.
gang is here.
Except my dad, so, I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, can I?
No, that's okay. So,
Sure.
we're back at a sketch review.
Yes,
Okay,
sir.
So we're basically interchanging information. Presumably, you've had some time to think about things that were discussed
We
a month
have.
ago.
We have.
And let me ask, there were a bunch of issues that had been raised. Dom, do you want to comment at all at this point?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Yes, Mr. Chairman. I just want to say that since our last presentation, the sketch review, we follow up with 2 meetings, which we spend about an hour and a half in each, and we basically come up with a summation of all the issues that are printed before you in a chart. So what was developed was identifying those issues, those points that need to be satisfied in the code and where the deviations are from those as proposed. I will say that this hotel exceeds the FAR by 1.7 or 3.7, and that they recognize where the height limitation is of the parapet, and also that there are 2 issues that will require a license agreement through the city administration.
Related to,
At the bottom of the page, the porte cochere and the cover walkway for the awnings, if they proceed with that design.
Mr. Chairman?
oh, yes,
Yeah,
I'm
just-
sorry. Sorry.
Just a couple of quick words. First of all, thank you for having us back for this 3rd sketch plan review. My father was going to be at the meeting today. Unfortunately, my mother, who's an octogenarian, fell down. She may have broken her hip. My father raced back from Rehoboth yesterday to Northern Virginia, took her to the hospital today, so we're waiting for word. But I just want you to know that my father really did want to be here today. A couple of points that my father wanted to make. First of all, we really do want your support for this project. Our team is really excited about it. We think it can be a catalyst for Rehoboth Beach. And we really would like you to support the project as we're going to present it today, including all the programming and the amenities, and the meeting conference room, as well as that rooftop experience. We really would like to get all of that if we can. And we'd like you to take a look at it almost as a package. And the reason I say that is our family really wants to build a beautiful hotel. And it's expensive to build a beautiful hotel. And if you recall, the very first submission that we made had about 121 rooms. And we decided, look, we want to make this an elevated experience for that upscale destination vacationer. So we dialed back the number of rooms. And of course, you know, that means you're going to get a little bit lower revenue coming in from the rooms during the season. And so having that meeting conference room and the rooftop experience where we like to have special events, no restaurants, no bars, it's for special events. We could even write that into the final site plan language if we need to. But having those amenities gives us those other revenue streams that will help compensate for those lost rooms, okay? And we're just hoping that we really get all that. To build this kind of hotel, you're looking at who knows, 8, 10, $12 million more than if we were to scale it back into a more generic-looking type box, which we don't want to do. And I know the city doesn't want to see that either. But we're really excited about what we have to present today, and we're just hoping we get your support. I think we wanted to turn it over to Ben, because Ben Seidel with Real Hospitality, he's going to talk about the elevated expectations that the big brands like the Marriotts of the world and Hiltons of the world have, as well as the expectations that consumers have when they go to a nice resort hotel. So, Ben?
I think that we could kind of defer to Susan Gay. Last meeting, you kind of surprised me with your knowledge of our industry, which is pretty impressive. I should start off by saying I don't have a dog in this race. This is not going to be my hotel. We operate them, that's it. We do own hotels all over the country. We're based here, and I think we introduced ourselves pretty well last time. But what Alex, I think, wanted me to just further explain in detail is there's a number of ways we can go as far as representing the owner and the hotel that he designs and builds. It could be an independent, it could be a branded hotel, it could be a soft branded hotel or collection hotel, as we talked last time. And I think with Rehoboth, and the interesting question, Mr. Mellon, that you asked last time is what happens if the beach goes away? I think it was a pretty good question, and you kind of stumbled me a little bit. But if that were to happen, I mean, you're kind of left with what the town has to offer. And from your very own question, I think that means that the more amenities and the more elevation that you have, the more differentiated you are from everybody else, especially since this is right in the middle of town. It's the icon location in town, deserves some attention. I think we're leaning toward the collection part of a brand so that we have an affiliation with a Hilton, a Marriott, or a Hyatt, a brand with that level of credibility for the relevancy behind it, the marketing behind it, and the securitization behind it as well. That said, to put up a Hilton Garden Inn or a Four Points by Sheraton or a Hyatt Place, I think we got enough of those here. And given this iconic location, I think we'd like to look toward Marriott, Hilton, or Hyatt for Centric or Tribute or Canopy, Curio, Tapestry, and call it the Belhaven Hotel with the backing. Regarding the amenities, to get a license agreement with those companies for that level of property, it requires all of the amenities that we've worked into the design, from meeting space to bar to restaurant. They don't have to be on the rooftop. I think that would be outstanding, but that's not gonna fly, so that's not what we'd even want to ask. But those amenities would be imperative to be able to sign a license agreement with those brands. And I think that with that, you have the credibility of the Belhaven and the history, the story behind it, but also the backing of an international hospitality company, which we operate 30% of our portfolio of over 100 properties are independents. They do extremely well. They take a while to ramp up, but when the economy kind of falls backwards, when we go here into the off-season and the shoulder seasons, it's these amenities and it's the brand reinforcement behind it that I think makes this a year-round viable location. And I think that's what I was asked to kind of further explain from last time.
I would like to add also that our family believes that the rooftop experience and that space up there, it's mainly for the locals during the off-season, the shoulder season, to have the award ceremonies, the galas, the bar mitzvahs, the weddings. We see it as an asset for Rehoboth and even Sussex County, bringing business down here during the slow season. And people stay at the hotel and they frequent all the local businesses when it's slow. So we see that as an asset for the city.
A good example would be, I think we talked about the asset that we have in Bethany Beach, which I think everybody was familiar with, the Bethany Beach Ocean Suites, which is a Residence Inn soft branded. It's the meeting space there and the restaurant that has that property performing the way that it performs. We have meeting space right up the street at the Fairfield, which was kind of surplus space due to the bulkhead that we had to build. And that serves to keep the rooms full all the way through November. And then again, we had a very successful February and March this year. It's our third year in operation, and that meeting space was there. The big holdback at that property was the food and beverage, the lack of an on-site food and beverage, but it still does well. But it's a Fairfield by Marriott, just like on every street corner in the US.
So you say these minimum amenities are the meeting rooms and the restaurant and bar, essentially? Is that to be part of these brands? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, to go Curio, they want 4-star status. So you mix a couple of different indices or different matrix into the mix. So 4 Diamond would be, so you have upscale class is what we start with, which is measured and defined by Smith Travel Research. It's kind of the Bible of our industry. And then what the brands are looking for from a service and amenities perspective is diamond ratings from AAA. And there are specific criteria needed for 5 Diamond, 4 Diamond, 3 Diamond, and so on. The 3 Diamond hotel is a good, solid, what everybody has and what this market in Ocean City is full of. 2 Diamond would be the more economic hotels. You start getting into the 4 and 5s, you're talking about room service, no fake plants, that kind of thing, padded hangers in the guest rooms. To go to 5 Diamond, you're talking about 24-hour room service, 24-hour concierge, that kind of stuff. These would be in the 4 Diamond, certainly 3+ level. And the brands that would offer that but be able to soft brand would be Hyatt-centric. The big ones would be Marriott Autograph or Marriott Tribute Portfolio by Marriott, Canopy, or Tapestry by Hilton. All of them would require food, beverage, and meeting space. I wouldn't go 4 seasons.
I mean, these kind of brands have.
Right, but then we have to be realistic. Is this market you have to be able to command an ADR. Remember, to build these things goes from $130 per room for a Fairfield or a Courtyard to like $300,000 a key to build with the amenity and public space that we're talking about here. So I think you're
As you increase the amenities, do you feel that there are any problems in supplying a workforce that's comparable to keeping the amenities at that level?
Well, that's getting to be a tougher problem throughout the country right now. We tend to fare better than the average person just simply because when we recruit for people, we're recruiting as a company that is the 15th largest that does what we do in the country. We have a very strong reputation, not only with the brands, but in the industry as well. We're very active in the American Hotel and Lodging Association. In fact, we have 2 of our apprentices got invited yesterday to the White House on July 25th to meet Donald Trump and his announcing the salute to working class month, which he declared earlier this month, and the event July 25th. It's just, I could spot things like that we're just extremely proud of.
Yeah, but the problem here in eastern Sussex County is that you really don't have an awful lot of workforce housing
I know.
because of the value of land. And so that your workforce at what you normally would pay them per hour have got to come from longer distances. And the question is that feasible? How well is that explored in your business plan?
We spend a lot of time with that. We were the first company to go to $13 an hour, so all up and down the coast, our hourly associates are already at $13 an hour. We're going to beat the competitive set to the $15 an hour that's going to be inevitable, at least in the state of Maryland. There are people that are moving now out of our Delaware hotels down to Maryland because they see that rate is going to raise to 15. That's already passed in the state of Maryland. So Delaware is going to kind of have to follow suit or lose its workforce to a border state is how we see it, and our labor counselors see that. So to combat that, instead of sitting back in our office twiddling our thumbs, our human relations department, along with their talent acquisition team, which is 3 people, are focusing on, well, I'm being recorded, and these are kind of trade secrets, but United Way has been a big supporter of ours. Also, the Eastern Correctional Facility, not to bring criminals into our, and put our guests and our associates at risk, but these are pre-release, not work release, but pre-release. So these are people with crimes of things like white collar, failure to pay child support. We screen each one of those, and these people are within 6 months of being socialized. So we were employing those folks into our back of the house, and very proud to say that if we hire from those institutions, we pay them the same amount, no reduced rate, even for Eastern Correctional Facility, as we pay all of our other associates. We believe in fair and equity.
And how will you handle parking for your workers? Because you certainly don't have the parking on site for that. The transportation, let's say transportation and parking if it's required. What do you envision?
Quite
being able to
honestly,
handle
we
that?
haven't addressed that yet, but looking at our local paper just the other day, Rehoboth does a great job in economic development from parking fines. So we'd like to be able to cooperate and participate
Saw
toward
that.
that. Congratulations, Mr. Martin. Most of our associates are public transportation, and whether that's Uber, whether it's our van service, or what have you, the hourlies. The management staff, supervisory staff, desk staff, that would have to be worked out.
All right. Peter?
One more thing I think Ben would be good to talk about is the thing that the brands do when you get that star, you get that, is they require the owner to put a certain amount of their money in escrow to keep the project fresh every 5 years.
Well, they used to, and they want to, but they've shifted that responsibility. So your point is accurate, but what Peter's referring to is an FF&E reserve, furnishings, fixtures, and equipment reserve. So typically, right up until about 2 years ago, all of the major brands would require, a 4 or 5% of your revenue per year put into a reserve for replacement, and those would be audited by the brand on an annual basis. That, as your operator, I'm responsible for conducting that audit and submitting that to Marriott, Hilton, or Hyatt. And if you don't have that set aside, that is a default of the license agreement. Lenders, how it works with a branded hotel, and where we kind of like it because it protects everyone, everybody has an agreement with everybody else, and those agreements have teeth. So if you picture a circle and the owner in the center, you have the operator, the lender, and the brand at the spoke. And obviously the operator would sign an agreement with the brand, and then the owner would sign an agreement with the lender and for his loan, and then he's going to sign with an operator for the operator. But what goes on behind the scenes is I need to be approved and sign a license agreement as well with the brand, and then I'm going to sign a subordination, a declaration and subordination agreement with his lender. All of them say the same thing, which says if anybody defaults, you're going to alert all of us. And all of our agreements say the same thing. If any one of these defaults, you're in default here. So where the brands used to do that is put the reserve in, and then if the reserve wasn't there, the brand could throw you in default, which would put the loan in default. So it's got teeth. And that's why, even with TripAdvisor, people think if you have an independent hotel, you're just as secure as a brand because you no longer have to rely on the fact that there's a big M up there to say how your business runs, because they're pretty consistent. The lending community likes the branding because there's teeth if anything goes wrong. The brands, to your point, Peter, not to call you off guard, catch you off guard, is there in our very litigious society, there are people that when the brand comes in every 7 and 14 years, that you have to renovate your property. Lawsuits have occurred because the PIP or the property improvement plans that the brand will hand to you and say, this is what you need to do to refreshen your property, exceeds the amount of what you told me I had to reserve, so I'm not going to do it. So the brands 2 years ago, for the most part, stopped putting that clause into the franchise agreements, but the lenders still do. They want to know that you have, and they don't put a specific amount. They say an amount adequate to cover the property improvement plan that will be issued by the brand every 7 and 14 years. So that's...
I learned something today too.
Well,
I knew that there was some pushback, but I didn't know that it was...
Yeah, if you have an independent property and you have an owner who's just an investor who's only in it for the returns on the investment and no pride of ownership, you have no idea what goes on in the property or what, and that's reflected in loan terms and things like that. With the brand, you know that there's guidelines.
Yeah, but it's more likely that if you don't meet those criteria, the big guys will spin the project off. That happens all the time,
If the economy's right.
if the economy's right.
Actually, I have a question that I asked at the last meeting, but you had already gone. And that was, I was fascinated about what you said about the half of the rooms might be people using points. And it makes sense because they travel for business and they want to come somewhere like here for pleasure. And of course, we don't have any hotels here currently that are in a kind of system where they have points. So this is a new thing. And I wanted to know how the revenues, kind of more importantly, how the taxes are paid. Because, you know, I gather that in some places, the guest still pays a tax, and in some places, they don't, actually. I mean, I think I've used points in places where I didn't have to pay a penny. So I'm wondering how the city and the state gets their tax revenue if half the rooms are going to be using points.
So to your point, we're over 70% occupancy at an area hotel in your town that is all redemption stays. That's the value of these points. And after this Marriott merger, I mean, it is, you're right, Ms. Gay, it's incredible.
It's a lot.
But what happens is we don't even submit that to the brand. They're tracking that too. It's all seamless integration through the PMS, which stands for Property Management System. So it's Marriott's system in this particular case. They know exactly what it is that they're feeding you. And when that comes, that goes into your box as room revenue. Difference is you didn't pay for it. Marriott did, but it's handled the same exact way and has to be reported in my occupancy. Certain markets, it's called an RPIE form. Here, we just submit our occupancy, our revenues, and our occupancy tax to the city.
But what rate, I mean, is it just?
Same rate.
It's the same rate as anybody else who walks in off the street?
Correct,
Right, okay.
yeah.
That's great.
It's a sale.
Yeah, okay, right.
It's just,
okay.
the only difference is who's paying it.
Right, okay.
Ms. Gay, just one point. One of the reasons why our family is so seriously considering these big brands is because it helps to lower the risk profile of the project, right? Because you have the cover of that brand, so your ramp-up period to get that occupancy up is much faster if you're part of a brand, right? So that's really important to us. If you don't have the brand, I think the term they use in the industry is naked. You open as a boutique, you open naked. People don't know the Belhaven nearly as well. What kind of experience do we have? So it takes a lot longer to ramp up that occupancy. So it makes the project riskier. And it also, if you have a brand, your loan terms tend to be a little bit better from what we understand.
A lot better.
A lot better, okay.
So what they do, because it mitigates risk, because of those documents, everybody's protected. The neat thing about the soft branding or the collection brand, as we talked about last time, and so I'm gearing all my conversations to you because you kind of threw me for a loop last time with your, you knew more, most people don't, you know, when you have a Fairfield, you can do fine until somebody puts a courtyard right next to you, which Marriott would do. And if they don't know what they're doing in the way of charging and stay pattern setting and all of that, you've already been defined by the brand of being a lesser brand than a Courtyard as a Fairfield. Same thing if a full-serve Marriott comes in and you're a Courtyard, you're going to kind of be relying under what they are. We call it rate retardation because you're retarding your rate to whatever the next guy's allowing you to do. It's very, very frustrating when a bad operator comes into your market. With a collection, or let's start with an independent hotel, you create a perception of value by the level of service delivery, the product that's there. And then once you do that, there is no, like if you look at the Belmore, which is a great hotel, they can charge whatever they want. There's nothing to compare it to by in the same brand in the same box. By going to a collection, you have that same benefit of that with your own name and your own story, but as Alex said, the protection and the backing. And the backing just isn't in the rules for risk mitigation as much as is resources to global sales, the frequent stay program, obviously the reservation system, the fact that when I sell a room under a brand's contract with Expedia or Booking.com, I pay about half the commission that I have to pay if I'm an independent hotel. There's just...
I mean, I think the uniqueness is very important. I mean, you know, you talk about compliance at CDP, and, you know, our uniqueness is really what defines Rehoboth. So I think the fact that it would remain the Belhaven and have that unique identity just fits right in.
That was our opinion. My company's and my marketing thing was, we pulled the old postcards.
Right.
We have to.
I saw those when you,
There it is right there.
Yeah.
Perfect.
I had one question.
Peter, you're, oh, I'm sorry.
Can I just ask one question? I wanted to ask you one.
Wait a minute, Ben.
if I just ask one last question. In terms of proximity with the association of hotels that you're describing, that this would be one, how is that in Sussex County? Like, where are you, or either the folks that you're dealing with or your competitors in Sussex County, or are there any, or would this be the only one?
What I was referring to, we have the Home 2 and Lewis under construction, the Holiday Inn Express in your town, I think that's Rehoboth, under construction, the Residence Inn with the Hudsons, we manage the Fairfield. I'm just talking about where we have our footprint.
Okay.
But you're talking about other operators. But you mentioned Sussex County. One of the things that we did, which was really neat, and we can't really do here in Rehoboth, but we'll be able to, is when we went to Newark and Dover and Wilmington and approach all the state associations about why they've been leaving Sussex County off of their rotation. We were met with, well, you guys don't have anywhere else for us to meet. And then we opened Bethany Beach and we said, come down and see this. And now if you care to visit the property at any time, you'll see the Delaware Society of Public Accountants, the Delaware Municipal Clerks Association, there's hundreds of them. Not big. Delaware is a small state, but now we're able to move that down to Sussex County. And that's your October, November, December,
Got it.
January. And it's really neat to see feet on the street there.
Because you reminded me, it was a number of years ago when they had the Disney trial here, and there were several days where, there's kind of high rollers, to say the least, were coming into Georgetown for this trial. Now, some of them arrived on their plane and they did their thing and they left, but I think the trial team and everything stayed at the Belmore for an extended period of time, and they were shuttling back and forth between Georgetown and here. It's not that far away, it's 20 miles. But I'm just thinking, you conceivably would have been that, would have served them, or served that clientele. And I'm not suggesting that you can base your business model on that, but I guess what I'm getting at is that you're in that, you're proposing to be in that league, I would assume.
Well,
I don't know if there's a growth industry for how many corporate trials we have, in Sussex County.
But that's for us as a company. Part of what we do is market and sell the hotel. We find and put pressure on area we call them DMOs, destination marketing organizations, to put us on their map or on their rotation. And it's up to us to get into that rotation and secure that business here. But what you're mentioning is why I'm excited about this, and I kind of said that to Alex way back 2 years ago when we first met, was there's not an event that goes on in Frederica that we don't fill our Rehoboth Beach and Lewis Beach properties. They go that far. And when there's the softball tournaments in Salisbury, to say that our oceanfront and bayfront properties in Ocean City aren't full, and we're full first. They would rather make that half-hour trip out to where we are, since they're coming down here for those big softball tournaments and be on the beach and be in an Ocean City and make that half-hour commute. We'll fill up faster than the Salisbury hotels do. And that's kind of really, that's a real eye-opener. And you take a look at the specific location that you guys are talking about. I made my formal introduction. I came to Rehoboth, I think, as a kid. I think I said that last time. And I worked at the Avenue restaurant as a busboy. It was my first job in hospitality. And I'm from Bel Air, Maryland, originally. And to know that block, when I introduced the project, as from our industry perspective, is probably one of the most prolific sites on the Eastern Seaboard. I wasn't exaggerating, because Rehoboth Beach has become a national destination. Everybody knows what Rehoboth is, whether it's because of the LGBTQ community or because of the food and beverage or all of it combined. Everybody knows it, and this location, I think I was out of line, maybe, Mr. Marcotte, when I said last time, you only get
I wasn't here last time. So
okay, well, I kind of said, I was kind of over-passionate about it, and I'm not trying to sell it. Like I said, it's not my property. All I'll do is manage it. He's asked me to come explain a little bit what we do. But you got a location. You only got one opportunity to get this right, and that's what I just wanted to try and impress. Because when you see what Pete has put together in a video, you'll...
I think you have a valid point of view.
Which is a good segue.
Yeah,
Peter?
okay, there you go.
Yeah.
Okay,
You've been waiting patiently.
I'm going to be brief and sort of get to the good stuff really quick. We did, again, do a summary of all the fine points that you asked about You should have a copy, and if you don't, I'm happy to give you a copy. I don't know if, and I'm going to basically walk through the plans and walk through the copy at the same time. So this is obviously a trip down memory lane here, beautiful old Belhaven in its glory days, and another beautiful picture of it. And the green roofs, the white building, the finial, the sort of romantic architecture, beachfront architecture is sort of what we're using in the back of our mind to inspire us to create the new Belhaven. So we don't think we're done, by the way, but we are on our way to creating a really nice design. And we appreciate all the input you've had with us, given us so far, and hopefully we'll continue down this journey. This is the site in pink. I did have my guy check the meets and bounds, and you were not crazy. A couple of them were pointing in the wrong direction, but that happens on occasions with meets and bounds and models. He was able to close it, so yes, we have a site plan that closes. And if you ever want to talk to my buddy, my guy, I'm happy to give you lessons on meets and bounds navigation. Is what they do. This is the roof plan, and it basically has not changed significantly since the last time we saw it. The ground floor, and just go right into the first part of the list, the off-street parking requirement. There's one space per guest room. We have 110 rooms, and we have 124 spaces provided. There's no requirement for the commercial space, so totally we're kind of we're in compliance there. In addition, as we said, this plan shows other places for scooter parking, bicycle parking, all kinds of alternate means of transportation, vehicle storage in this plan as well. The service requirement is one space and for the building, and we show a service space in this location back here, okay? In terms of we're going to skip and go through the setbacks in the future, but in terms of the building setbacks, the building is along Rehoboth Avenue complies, along the boardwalk complies, and along Wilmington Avenue complies. There's no setback requirement on the sight line, on the side yards. The building height sets back at 24 feet at an angle of 30 feet, 30 degrees along Rehoboth, and 14 on Boardwalk and Wilmington Avenue. I'll show you how that works once we get into that. The lot coverage item, and actually we'll go back. The building as a commercial building is allowed 100% lot coverage. Our building is 100% in its lot coverage. The retail-only portion of the lot is 36%. All right, so but that's sort of just a separate information piece. The hotel, the residential or motel rooms is allowed to have 50% average on all floors, maximum of 75%. We're at 44% on all floors, and the second floor is just right under 75%. It's like 74.5. We round it up. In terms of the meeting floor, the meeting space. So the meeting room itself is actually 3,000 square feet, and the requirement allows up to 5,000 square feet and 25% lot coverage. So this is a little bit of apples and oranges here. Our meeting space is 3,000 square feet. The balance of the terrace, the pre-function and service area is 4,900 square feet. So it's under 5,000 square feet. Both parts are under 5,000 square feet, but it's a little bit apples to oranges. We just articulate this here, and we're on the same page as Dom and the planning staff in regards to that.
Is the meeting room considered the ballroom? Is that?
Yes, it's the meeting room. It's a divisible meeting room. So it's a meeting room that opens up.
And if the intent is to have this as a destination, I know you've mentioned weddings and things like that.
Right.
Is that what that room would be used for?
Yes.
And will it be able to be provided with food, and how will that be handled?
So it is not allowed to have food and, in the current code as it is written right now, right? And so that is supposed to actually happen outside of the room. And so in the pre-function space, that's why we have a big pre-function space. See this way how large this is, so that you could actually serve food and beverages out in that space and still be in compliance with the letter of the law.
And is that a good economic business plan that's satisfactory for encouraging that kind of?
I mean, I think that is something that is an operations issue, and it's a little bit out of my pay grade, and I'm sure Ben and his team will have to work with the city in order to make sure that there's guest satisfaction there. Okay, so the big issue is the FAR, and what you asked me to do was actually basically go through the entire FAR breakdown, okay? The FAR that's allowable is 2.0, which is 74,950 square feet, okay? Our lot is approximately 38,475 square feet. FAR 2 means 74,950. The garage, as written, is included in the FAR. That is let's go back. When Dom said that we're proposing a 3.7 FAR, that would include every aspect of the list that we're going to go through, and that would be equal to 142,796 square feet. That's the calculation of what we are proposing to build, okay? So how much of it is counted in FAR is a little bit of a negotiation and a little bit of an understanding of what normally is included in FAR, right? Yeah. However, the letter of the law is that it should all be included in FAR. So there's a garage level, it's about 38,000, the entire ground level of the plot is underground, and it's a garage, and that's one FAR, so that's 38,475 square feet. The second floor, roof terrace under roof, so in other words, this is the second floor, and there are roof overhangs that, and balcony overhangs that sort of happen all along this edge, all along all the edges, right? And then also along the pool. Right, so that area, AKA the covered portion of the second level, is 2,400 square feet, which is 2,900 square feet, which is a 0.07 FAR. The pool itself, that pool right there, is about 1214, so that's 0.3 FAR, right? We talked about going from the smaller rooms and the number of rooms to the smaller building, but a larger room. In other words, a smaller number of keys, but a larger room. That is equal to about 6,500 square feet, or 0.17 FAR, right? The meeting room facility, that's both the meeting room, the pre-function, and the back of house, is approximately 7,727.2 FAR. The balconies, all of the balconies in the project, because they're covered, according to Rehoboth, need to be included in the FAR. Even though they're outdoor space, they need to be included in the FAR. That is approximately 3,800 square feet and 0.1 FAR. The rooftop venue, both enclosed and unenclosed, is about 2,200 square feet, plus the 2,800 square feet. So between the two is like 0.13 FAR. Right? So what we are proposing or what we're going to propose is that of these FAR diagram elements, the ones that are interior, we believe should be included, in the FAR. Okay, so that total is 2.5 FAR. The stuff that's outside, exterior, not enclosed, and the garage, because it's below grade, is what's excluded in that number. So we're at is a proposed FAR of 2.5 and 96,266 square feet. So that's kind of the summary of where we are. So let's just, I'll go through the plans real quickly so that you can see that. Typical floor plan. So this shows, again, all the light are the balconies, all right? And then this is the roof venue, rooftop venue is the light beige, and the orange is the enclosed. The gray are the elevator override and the staircases. All that is included in the FAR calculation that we're proposing. Right? So we're not suggesting that it's not included. We're saying it is, and that's how we got the 2.5 FAR. Okay.
And the purpose of the rooftop is for what?
So the rooftop venue is intended to be an amenity space for the hotel and for the community.
To do what?
Events, special occasions, galas, award ceremonies, bar mitzvah, maybe somebody wants to have a wedding up there, depending on the weather. Special events.
With food or not food, or?
We would probably want to have food for some of those special events, but we don't want a bar, we don't want a restaurant. But for those special events, sure, we would probably want some food and beverage.
And how will you get it there? You'll bring it up from the restaurant?
Be catered.
So it will not be in service, that is, you won't have the facility, the kitchen facility.
No. Yeah, it would be brought up and set up temporarily and taken down. So it'll come up through the elevators and service that way. Okay, the building height diagram and the building height requirement is 42 feet tall. So what we have done, and 4 stories, so the building is 4 stories, and what we have done is the roof of the 4th floor is 42 feet tall. Okay, the building height along the street is 14 feet, and it sets back at a 30% setback line along Rehoboth, along the boardwalk and Wilmington Avenue, and along Rehoboth Avenue, that setback line starts at 24 feet. What we are proposing is, so we feel like we're in compliance in terms of the building height. Now, one of the things we did do, Mr. Chairman, is we set back the parapet. We had shown a parapet at the top of this volume here, which made it appear to be about 45 feet tall. So we set the handrail back and we made it a glass handrail. So the building is set back, the handrail is actually set back, so the perceived space is still at that 42-foot line. And you'll see this when we dive into the renderings and the animation, how it does change fairly significantly, the feel, the scale of the building significantly. We also added roofs or canopies over top of the upper level balconies, which starts to soften that edge of the building. And then the last thing we did do, we did look at making the pavilion on the roof smaller. And basically what happened when we first we did set it back somewhat more than it was, but we looked at making it much smaller, and it started to kind of look like a Pizza Hut up there. So we felt like it needed to be of scale with the rest of the building, sort of the way the main roof defined the Belhaven, the original Belhaven. So in terms of that, we did look at all of those items, and we came back to what we feel is it's a little smaller than what we had last time, but it's the right scale for the building.
What's the purpose of that pavilion? I mean, is that more just event space also up there?
We're circling around the same issue. It's
Okay.
the rooftop event space.
So there's exterior event space, and then there's interior in that pavilion event space.
That's right, and that roof,
Okay.
that will be actually probably some kind of nano walls or walls, glass walls that open up completely.
Oh, I see, okay.
So in nice weather, it'll be an indoor-outdoor space. When it's cold out, it'll be closed, and when it's really hot out, it'll probably be closed. But the idea is that it's sort of an indoor-outdoor space, and that's why we treat it as almost one space in particular. And the connection between the two will also be an indoor-outdoor space, but we have to have an enclosed connection in order to meet fire exit. The other thing we did on the building is we tried to create a little more variety in the streetscape along the ground floor. At one point, we had this green roof going all the way back. We created this kind of tripartite facade along the Belhaven. We added some greenery along the edge of the building. We tried to soften it up a little bit more. We brought some of this different material down to sort of create a building that has almost not so much one building feel, but like a collection of buildings like the old Belhaven did. We still believe that the finial as an iconic piece that has a memory is really important, and we think it adds to the character of the building, so we kept it. So in terms of the building heights, the very top of the finial is 68 feet tall, all right? Where the base of the finial is and the green roof starts is 57 feet. That happens to be the same height as the elevator override. So this is the elevator override right here. That roof and that eave of the green roof is, I'm sorry, the top of this and the top of that are at 57 feet.
Isn't that then the height of the building?
What?
Isn't that then the height of the building?
Being that it's set back from the building, typically in the code, when there's an elevator penthouse, it's actually not a part of the building height requirement. But
Isn't that height, Don? Isn't that the height of the building?
There's no height limitation. I'm sorry. There's no height limitation for the elevator shaft.
But that's not just the elevator
It's not
shaft,
just
that's
the-
an entire room.
The other structure is the height. Has height limitations, but the elevator shaft unfortunately doesn't provide for any height limitation.
Not the elevator shaft, but the function room,
Yes,
the fifth floor of the building.
yeah, the fifth floor of the
Top
building,
that
that's
roof
correct.
is 57 feet.
All right,
That's the height of the building.
that's the height of the building.
It's not
Right.
42 feet.
No,
no, the 42 feet is the height at this point, right, at the top of the
parapet
fourth
wall.
floor. That's the 47.
is the height of the
building.
57 is the height of this roof right here.
It's the height of the building, 57 feet.
If you want to say so. Someone might say 68 feet is the height of the building.
Well, I was just going to say that.
Yeah. So, no, I don't want to take sides, but yes,
the top of the
68 feet
finial
the
is
top of the
68, yeah.
Finial, and-
Right.
but, or one could argue that the top of the enclosure is 51 feet, that's that height right there. Okay, that's the eave, all right, of the green roof. But anyway, in all cases, you know exactly how tall each one of these elements are. Label them as you wish, but this is the project that we are trying to develop here. Although it does, I think, say that in spires in Rehoboth, there's no limit to spires. So if the finial is a spire, then in theory, we could go with the 57 feet as the top of the building, since the spire has no limit. But it's just a thing. The other thing about this, if one were to say that this whole upper level was an architectural embellishment, it's allowed to be 10% and 50 feet tall. Okay, so what we've done is we've counted all of the vertical pieces, right? And that equals about 22%. So we're over the 10% by 12%. And our top and the heights are as we described below. So anywhere from 51 to 68 feet, depending on which part of it you're looking at. Got it? Questions? Okay. Last few elements of this chart is the FEMA freeboard requirement. We're required to have a 1-foot freeboard or a 0 feet with flood proofing. And while we will still design the building to meet the FEMA requirements in terms of ground level outlets and electrical equipment and all that stuff has to all be above. But in terms of flood proofing, that would be the water coming into the building. If we create and allow for the creation of flood proofing, we're allowed with zero there. So that's the approach we're taking there. And then the last two elements on this list are the portico share and the covered walkway. Both of those exist beyond the property line. And so that is a total of 1,800 square feet for the portico share and 400 square feet for the covered walkway. And that would be handled via a license agreement with the city. Rent the
And where will that
I'm
be?
sorry, where is that located?
So that's basically, if you look in this diagram, it's right here. Okay, that's that thing there. And it's also, oh, so I'll go back. So that's the portico share down here. Where's my arrow? There it is. That's that.
Okay.
Okay, and that's the overhang all along the street edge and along the boardwalk. Okay.
What is that, 6 feet?
6 feet along, 6 feet along Rehoboth and the boardwalk, and 12 feet on Wilmington Avenue.
It's like, that's half of it, isn't it? I mean, you're talking about the overhang over the sidewalk or the boardwalk, that's what you're talking about, but the overall roof is
It's more because I brought the roof back.
back, right?
Yeah, so I architecturally treated it,
you're
but I tried to minimize the amount over. But I tried to break the scale of it down so it doesn't look like this big thing hanging off. And, brought the scale of the building down a little bit. So, let's see, what else do I have to show you? So, in terms of, these are the views that we've seen that were a part of the original package. So this is a view coming down Rehoboth Avenue, and all these views are kind of nice to look at, but they're nothing compared to the animations that I'm going to show you. So, but it does show you how the building sort of begins to break down in scale. And I know our neighbors here, we took off the green roof that was overhanging your property there, so you have a little less impact on your solar panels. And then you can see the green roof of this building sort of comes down and along the corner there. Coming down Wilmington. So, go ahead.
the dimension of the pavilion on the roof.
So the pavilion on the roof is approximately 42 by 42.
42 by 42.
1,600, 1,700 square feet.
All right, so pretty excited to show you this. I'm not sure which one's going to come first, but we did do our first ground level animation on this project. And what I was worried about on the ground level animations is we don't have real control over the speed. So here it is. Wait a minute, I'll make this bigger. So, you're running pretty fast here.
And I said, nobody can walk that fast down Rehoboth.
Yeah. I can't slow it down. We're working on that, but like I said, it's pretty effective. We're kind of like a basketball player, running as fast down the court as possible.
Segue.
Right. Just go fish.
But now we're starting where the hotel is. See, we were able to slow down a little bit here, so that's the entry to the hotel. I don't know why he took his foot off the gas. He's back on the scooter again. It's interesting, like the siren's perfect. Okay, now we're going to actually swing north. Candy Kitchen will have food, we'll have stuff in it. Now we're gonna kind of go back down the little crossover, and we're gonna drive in a car and look at the building as we drive by it. We're gonna walk down the boardwalk. One of the parts of the comprehensive plan talk about making Wilmington Avenue a better place. And we feel like with the building and the curbs and the sidewalks and the drop-off and the activity that this building does that. Front entrance, that's the main entrance to the hotel. There's the meeting space. So we really appreciate you making us do that. I think it's very, very helpful. And then we did redo the other one. From the aerial view. Seagull view of the new Belhaven. Or drone. This is the updated design as we presented. Very strongly that we're creating a destination hotel for the future. Infinity Edge pool there, right over the front entrance, so you'll be able to see that as you come in. And we think that this hotel will, bring back the architecture of the past and be a part of the future. That's our project. So basically, Susan is going to give a few words about the comprehensive plan, and we'll answer any questions.
Yeah, before
Yes.
we let Susan go, you have individual terraces as opposed to continual long terraces outside the rooms.
Right.
To what degree in your design are you at the point of considering the effect of hurricanes and winds on that kind of construction?
So the building.
You want to
will be a-
address that?
Yeah, the building will be a concrete building, and all those handrails will all be hurricane rated to the current loading of, that's required. So it is part of the design process. The engineers will be tasked with doing that. The winds don't blow, there's not particularly they don't get into that level of eddies when it's blowing that big, it just blows. And the design will be required to meet those design loads. And whether they're separated or together, it's still sort of pretty much the same loading. But we like the separation between just for the sense of privacy between the guest room. We think it's an elevated experience. And so that's the reason why we're.
One of the things that I've noticed in Florida over the last couple of years in the Hollywood area is a tremendous amount of reconstruction of those kinds of terraces that basically have either rusted out or have not withstood the weather, and it has posed a gigantic construction problem for rebuilding them because they've had to essentially remove the outside wall and go deep within the structure of the main structure in order to provide the kind of supports. I don't know, what your engineering approach is to that, but this has got to be for the long term.
Yeah, no question about it. Those buildings down there are old.
Well, some of them aren't that old. That's
Well,
one of the problems.
There's also no question about that down in South Florida, there's a lot of people building things quickly.
Yeah.
And
Well, I
quality
know.
control is not necessarily high end. We will, and really, to be really honest with you, we won't be building this building. We'll be building this building with a national construction team. So we will bring in a very high-quality construction team, and our engineers, of course, will be, hurricane qualified. So it's not going to be, we really think we're building a monument. It's going to be an industrial strength building. Mr. Papa John has told me from the get-go, he wants this thing to last a really long time, and that's all part of it. This is not some guys in South Florida trying to build something as quickly as possible to maximize the money as soon as possible.
Just out of curiosity, I mean, this is would be a huge construction project in a very limited space, and a space that basically is occupied by a lot of people. How on earth do you carry something like that off? Where are your laydown areas? Where are your, how do you do a construction project like this?
We have good relationships with our neighbor, Mr. Grotto. I know his name's not Grotto, but, and we probably will use his back lot as our staging, but there will be, there will be a public, access agreement for us to allow to work into the sidewalk and close it down for a certain period of time. And, it's a temporary thing to build a building, but it does take time to do that. And we will, when we get our construction team on board, we'll start that dialogue with you all, and you'll see how it's going to get done.
This is probably getting ahead of the fact, but have you thought about the timing of when you'd have to start to get the thing so that most of your construction would be in the off-season?
I know that the goal is to go as quickly as possible here. So, but I would imagine that we would try to start in the third quarter, whether it's this year or next, and try to get most of the superstructure up out of the air in the first 6 months. So ideally, we're kind of not impacting too much of the ground level activity during the summer. So if we started the third quarter and we're sort of second quarter wrapping up the big stuff, that should be possible. Then finishing out the inside during the summer.
I mean, ideally,
It's
we.
only 110 rooms, it's only 96,000 square feet. Could be bigger.
I think my dad is, his thinking is, hopefully we can start moving dirt after summer of 2020, so maybe September or October of 2020. Hopefully we can move dirt. So.
But we'll have a really crack, construction team. There's Whiting Turner is one team that's really been looking at us, and we've been building buildings with them for years, and they really build a project like it's a battle operation and they really crank it out. So we're hoping that maybe we'll be able to get either them or somebody like them on board.
Okay. I just wanted to make some comments.
Susan, talking to the microphone, please.
I
Thank you.
took your advice from last time and read more thoroughly the comprehensive development plan, like all of it, except for some appendices. But when I did that, it says in the very beginning, it's a very thoughtful document, that it states clearly, very clearly, it's to create goals for change and development within the city, and it is to be the central source of guidance. And I went down to the chapter on Rehoboth's built environment, and a priority action is to examine establishment of a new mixed-use zone category designed to encourage development and redevelopment of selected commercial areas along major commercial streets. It talks about developing a constant vitality in the commercial zone instead of just seasonal. It cited some business owners as suggesting that this could be obtained by having core businesses with year-round commercial bases, a high standard of site and architectural design, and a higher quality and high-end businesses. I think this project is doing just that. It's a redevelopment, it's a mixed use, it's in a very special location where it brings people right down into town in the boardwalk, and it aims to meet all of these goals. And really, that's all I wanted to bring out, is it will bring more year-round vitality to the commercial area. And that's all I had.
What are our objectives today, David? Because don't they have to go to the Board of Adjustment, and this is the next step? Is that what we talked about last time?
Well, it's pretty, I guess one question would be, if you had to give up some of your wish list, what parts of your wish list would you give up? That might be the first question. And if the answer is none, then we move on to something else.
I mean, I really do think the answer is none. We really want the whole package. We really do. The feasibility of the project is, if we're going to build something this nice, we really want to have those amenities, because that creates that elevated experience and year-round opportunity to bring in business. So we really don't want to give up any of these aspects.
Could you just explain to me, please, our height limit is 42. What is your argument for adding another, whatever that is, 57 or whatever that is? I didn't get what you were saying with the limits that we have.
Our approach to the height limit is that the building itself, in other words, the rooms, the elevators, the bathrooms, everything in the building is at the 42-foot.
Right.
So everything that is beyond the 42-foot height is either a mechanical unit or an embellishment, an architectural embellishment.
No, but I'm not talking about the mechanical. I'm talking about where you're having this extra room.
The roof terrace, the meeting room.
Yeah, those are.
The venue, we're calling that an embellishment. We're putting that.
You're calling the rooms embellishments?
We're calling that an architectural embellishment. That's what we're calling. That's the way we're referring to it in our approach.
Can I?
So anybody else could do that if they wanted to call it something else?
In theory, yes.
David, can I comment? Yeah, it goes to actually, in the last applicant who was here, a similar comment. And based on our discussion last time, I went to all the textbooks I could find on architecture and urban planning and urban form and everything else with regard to parapets and finials and et cetera, et cetera. And I couldn't find a definitive definition. But in this particular case, it ends up being 68 feet. And recently, there was an article in a popular Delaware publication that talked about the history of how Rehoboth Beach decided on the decisions it did to get to where we are with our height restrictions and what they didn't want to do. The part that concerns me is that I think what you want to do is terrific. And I think in terms of the comprehensive plan, it's terrific. But within that comprehensive plan, there's what's implicit in it that's been discussed is scale and form. And this would end up being in a scale that is far different than anything that currently exists. And even taking into account some of the limitations within the code, and I think the FAR is one that there is general agreement with regard to the parking issue, and others have gone to the Board of Adjustment to address. In this particular case, for example, the elevator, you've taken the elevator shaft, which would in fact be something that is higher than the 42-foot, but now you've surrounded it by part that is a structure that is part and parcel of the design of the building. And so now it's no longer an embellishment per se, or in that context, it's now part of the building with a roof. And then it goes higher, and on top of that, there's an embellishment. It gets very hard within that context to look at this and say it's compliant. Now, the Board of Adjustment has the privilege to modify that if they want. But I think the real issue here is within the building code as it currently exists and within the comprehensive development plan, that the scale of this and the form and function, you've said the comment that the family wants to basically have the whole package. You could have put up a Motel 6, but you're not.
Correct.
And you probably could have made it financially work, perhaps. But this represents your moral hazard. On the public side of the equation is, you will get the benefits of it. The public gets the benefit only from an indirect perspective, and that is they might like to look at it. They may or may not stay there. If you did a Motel 6, the people that came there would probably eat at Grotto's. If you put up an upscale hotel, they'll most likely go to one of the more expensive restaurants. But the balance sheet essentially is yours. And when you create something that essentially goes to a much higher height than is called for in the building code, now it starts to become on the public's balance sheet. And they only benefit very indirectly. The part and parcel that is important to the public that's represented in the CDP, and even though we're going through a reevaluation, but I'm accepting at the moment that the recent history that was published in the magazine, as well as our own knowledge of the CDP and having been a resident for many years, the public decided that they would like to keep the magnitude and scale of the buildings lower, and we don't want to become Ocean City. Now, that may mean that in a commercial district, you perhaps can't build what you would like to build, and you may request some modifications that tweak things a little bit. My concern here, from the public's perspective, which is what I'm supposed to be doing, it's not supposed to be based on what Mike Strange thinks personally or what my own bias for or against may be, this appears to be wildly out of proportion. And even though it may meet your objectives and some ancillary objectives, I don't know if it meets the public's objectives. And so, quite frankly, I'm conflicted on that.
Well, Mr. Strange, so let me address that. So I'm not sure when the framers of the current zoning code drafted the zoning ordinance. But what I will say is that I think the public's expectations have changed over the years. I do. I think they have an elevated expectation as to what they expect to find at a hotel. And most of the modern hotels that I've seen gone up, even some of the boutique hotels, they offer a rooftop experience. That's what consumers want these days. And I share your concern about, I don't want Rehoboth Beach to become like Ocean City, neither does my father. But I think what I would say is that we're fortunate to have a footprint that is large enough so that we can add this rooftop experience without creating a canyon effect and without creating a shadowing effect. And that's just because we have a large enough footprint to do it. So I don't see us creating something that's going to become another Ocean City-like hotel. And that's not what this is.
Right,
I think the scale and the form is at the level that most of the other Rehoboth Beach hotels could be at. If you take a look at the Atlantic Sands or the Sun View, they're similar.
Peter, did you find out the Ocean City Marriott, you were going to find out the height when I asked that at the last minute, the one you built down there? Did you find out the height? No, you didn't. It's okay. It's okay. I shouldn't have put you on the spot. You said it was about 50 though, right?
Oh, I'm sure it is.
Okay. So he built a hotel in Ocean City that's 50 feet. And this is taller than that. I mean, the one thing that was interesting about the article, and I actually didn't realize this, we have the highest height limit of any coastal town. You know, I mean, Lewis is 40 feet and Dewey is only 35. Bethany's, you know, where his Ben's Hotel is only 31 feet.
Right.
And the county, except for industrial zones, doesn't even go above 42. So it's kind of all over like that, you know?
I understand.
Frustrating from my point of view is that an article like that that's written, there's a picture of a building that's 8 or 9 or 10 stories tall.
Excuse me, sir.
Yeah.
I need for you to move on.
There's an article, and there's a picture of the building that's 8 or 9 stories tall.
Yeah.
It's a rectangular box that was built in 1978, right? We're not proposing a project like that at all. But we're being tainted with, we're being tainted with that brush.
Yeah, no,
And
no,
so that's the
Yeah, I
real
see
issue
this.
I
Yeah,
have. So, I mean, so I am kind of a little upset about the image, not necessarily with the, I didn't get a chance to read the whole thing, I only read the first.
Oh, the image is there because that's what we have. I mean, that's just, it's.
I
what's
understand
there.
that, but
Yeah.
that's the
Yeah, no, I get it.
paranoia, you know, thing that, oh my God, it's not that. We're building a gentle building. You saw the way, it's big, it's changing the character. There's no question about that. We're not saying that.
That's the issue. It isn't a question, you're not being tainted at all. And the objective here is, and that's why I said I looked at every textbook I get my hands on.
Yeah.
And I would agree completely in terms of the experience. I don't stay at Motel 6. I haven't for 40 years. But the point is, what's the context? We represent the town of Rehoboth Beach, not the commercial interest, not the residential interest, the collective interest. And we're charged with trying to figure out, we have the code, we also have to look and envision in terms of what the CDP believes, what the current CDP says. We're currently going to reevaluate that. And so we're left with the situation. You have a facility. You have the right to propose anything you want. You also have the right to make all the money you want. You also have the right to lose all the money you want. That's the moral hazard here. But we have to represent the public side of the balance sheet. And as I said, this exceeds anything within our code. There are some pieces of our code which, quite frankly, are out of date, and I think we have general consensus on some of those.
Sure.
But there are others, the code exists to implement the CDP to a degree.
Doesn't the CDP, though, recommend incentives for these redevelopments, knowing that the current code doesn't exactly address them?
That is correct.
Okay.
But then the issue is, when you do that, then it becomes one of implementation. So here we have something that's, quite frankly, a very beautiful design, but is within the context of the urban form of Rehoboth Beach, the collectivism of Rehoboth Beach, the perceptive of Rehoboth Beach. The question was raised earlier about shadow lines. Personally, that wasn't part of my decision-making process to look at this. I look at it more from the standpoint of urban form and vitality and livability. And in and of itself, I think it would be a benefit. The concern I have is in terms of what does it do collectively? And I'm concerned about that. It's an order of magnitude over anything else. Is it better or worse? I don't know. I just don't know.
Well, I think you also have to think about the precedent that this is setting.
Exactly.
I think it's a good-looking building, but when the difficulty is when you layer the code on top of it, it greatly exceeds the codes in many ways. And I mean, to say that a room that's occupied on the 5th floor is an architectural embellishment, I mean, that'd be like, Dom, if I came to you to build a house and said, I want to put a 4th floor on there. Well, Lee, you can't do that. Well, Dom, it's an architectural embellishment. Going forward is, are all the property owners going to come in with this as the precedent, saying that my 5th floor is an architectural embellishment, or my spire can go to 68 feet? Or, I can have 5 stories. I mean, it's a 5-story building. It's not a 4-story building, it's a 5-story
I
building.
think the answer, it's a slippery slope argument is a classic, I understand.
Yeah, I mean,
But it
it's-
depends on the property, the individual property. How big is their property? Do they have a canyon effect? Is there a shadowing effect? If their property is really small and they want to add more up above and there is a canyon effect and shadowing effect, then you say no. It's different than the Papa John family.
Yeah, but I
property.
mean, to say you need to have a rooftop venue, I mean, you're oceanfront. You could have a rooftop venue on the 1st floor, and it'd be it'd be a great rooftop venue.
Well, I quibble with that,
It
but
doesn't
I
need to
understand
be
what you're
the-
saying.
It doesn't need to be 57 feet up to be a good rooftop venue.
I think, again, getting to expectations, some of the newer hotels, I lived in Richmond, Virginia for 30 years, and it seems like every other new hotel going up in Richmond has a rooftop experience. It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Quirk Hotel, if you want to take a note, the Quirk Hotel in downtown Richmond, I was just on their roof. I think they go up about 6 stories. It was packed up there. And talk about an opportunity to Instagram, Facebook, I mean, all that social media stuff. People love it. It sells.
And
They
it's-
want that now.
And it's a hotel, it's a public building, so it is a public, like you say, it's for the general public. Well, this is a space that's open to the general public. Anybody can go there at any time. It's a public space. Okay, it happens to be on a private piece of land, but it's a public space. And so that's the thing that's, kind of a different part of it. This is actually an elevated terrace for anyone in Rehoboth to go and enjoy the seaside.
At any time?
At any time, 24/7.
Why would they go there? There's no food, there's no.
To go see the view, to look at the stars.
It's like an observation deck.
Well, there's security. We have security in hotels. We have security. Yeah, that's part of the private part. They're obviously not going to allow you to do something wrong because you become liable for them on your property.
I'd like to make a comment. I think it's an interesting plan. I do. I mean, there are certainly, we've been faced with things, people coming forward before us, and sometimes we're appalled. And so I'm just saying, this is not that. I mean, I think it's an attractive building. I think you guys have done a tremendous job to try to package this thing, and I get that. I understand that this is a package. You're looking for this experience. It's got all this experiential stuff and everything. However, and you knew that was coming. It's too tall right now. It is, okay? And I think that's the issue. I mean, I think that's everybody's sort of primary issue here. And maybe, and I don't think any of us are here to make this judgment, whether or not that idea or that number or whatever it is the right number. Maybe we have missed the boat and it's a new age and people have a different thoughts about this and so forth. But right now, our code specifies a number, and this is currently exceeding it. And the question is, what are we going to do about that? And is there justification on your part that this will not be functional or it will not be viable if we don't have what we say, we want the whole package and so forth and so on. But it's hard for us to gauge. I think we're all betting men and women enough to maybe gauge what it might be. But I personally don't think that there's been a sort of a long history of what people feel is the character of the city and so forth and so on. And frankly, I think this exceeds that. So I guess I think maybe David was hedging the question before when he said, if you're going to give up something, what would it be? and I'm just looking at, I think the obvious, I mean, pick your floor, but I think it's one of the floors. And if the top floor is, I'm looking at it this way. If you didn't build the top floor, but you still want to adhere to your plan of getting started in, at the end of the season in 2020 or whatever that is, that's enough time for a sort of a public relations campaign as to, in the future, is the height limit of Rehoboth not practical in this day and age or something like that. I mean, that's something you could certainly add in the future if the code accommodated it.
Right.
So, that's what I'm looking at. I mean, I just think we're going to have I think it's going to be a tough sell.
Well, I think, Bunky, in addition to what you said, I mean, if we look at what the Board of, who knows what the Board of Adjustment's going to do?
No.
Nobody
And
knows what
I'm
they're
not-
going to do.
I'm not presupposing that.
But if we look at the precedent of what they just did,
Yeah.
they allowed the parking area to not be included in the floor area, which I think we've all said probably should be a code change. I mean, that makes sense that parking garages underground aren't included. But they denied them on all the other additional FAR requests. And they allowed them to have 5 feet or 5 stories within the 42 feet. And now we're debating a 3.5-foot parapet wall on the front. Now, you know, given it's a different location, but this is so radically different than that.
But is it, I mean, it's 5 stories, right? So call it 5 stories. It's still 5 stories.
Yeah, but it's 57 feet. It's not 42 feet.
7 feet, it's the core, the street is 120 feet wide or 100 feet wide. They're huge streets. One side of it is the ocean, right? There's no canyon effect. It sets back
But the code
five
doesn't, the
stories
code doesn't say
is
that.
not the end of the world.
That's not the issue.
And so here's what'll happen, right? I can tell you what'll happen.
Okay.
Is we'll build a building that's 4 stories, and Rehoboth will lose the opportunity to have a rooftop venue on this corner. It's just that simple. That's what's gonna happen. We're not gonna lose guest rooms instead of a rooftop. So it's really, so what is the vision? What is this comprehensive plan? To not allow rooftop venues? That's your decision. You guys are the governing board, not us. We're just the applicant. But that's kind of it in a nutshell. So
Actually, that's not our decision.
It isn't our
Board of-
decision.
Our
It is not
decision
our
is
decision.
you meet the
okay,
code.
okay, so it's the Board of
Yeah,
Adjustment.
I mean, that's not our,
Well, we'll argue with them.
I don't think we're the arbiters of taste here. I mean, I don't think
No,
that's
it's
it.
not
Yeah,
arbiter of
right.
taste, it's arbiter of use. This is not taste, this is use.
Right, but
Mr.
we're greater than taste, I would say.
If you look back to last month's meeting, you brought us options A, B, and C. And option A, if I remember correctly, did meet the FAR requirements without the parking. And what we said to you was, you know, bring us something that met the code, which you did, and then bring us your wish list. And what you brought us was option C on steroids. It certainly sounds from this group as though option C may not work for you. So maybe it's up to us or up to us jointly to figure out what will work and what we can support in the way of variances for you to go back to the Board of Adjustment.
but, I mean, David, do we even weigh in with the Board of Adjustment? I mean, they're kind of they're independent of us. We can't.
Mr.
Yeah,
Chairman,
we
my
can't sway them.
my understanding was we left the last meeting, you want us to come back and present based on your recommendations, which we've done. But I think you had indicated that we would have an easier time with the Board of Adjustment if we had your support. So what I'm trying to determine is, what would you support with regard to this project? Is it everything but the rooftop experience, or is it everything but the enclosed area on the roof, but we can still have a rooftop experience? I mean, where is that support?
Well, I think,
I've got some, go ahead.
well,
Go ahead.
I think one of the things that, we support the code. I mean, that's where we start. But as we've done in previous applicants, where if they had met the code, what they had done would not have really been as good than if they went to the Board of Adjustment and made some modifications, and they did it with our support, because we felt that was the case. In this particular case, as an example, you took the elevator shaft, which normally would not have, it would have the mechanicals in there, depending on the type of, that you were doing. But you took it so that people could exit at the floor and would be exiting at 46, well, whatever it is, 42 feet. But then they're exiting into a building. It's a glass enclosed room, which then in turn has a roof, which then in turn has an embellishment. So it kept building and building and building, as opposed to meeting the code. So it used the elevator shaft as a way, as a segue, to create an edifice on that floor and make it part and parcel of the entire building, which was not the intent of the code. And so it led to sequela after sequela after sequela. So what we would support, or what I would support in terms of, just as we did in the last applicant, is they met the code. There was some question with regard to the last 3 feet. But the last 3 feet on a 42-foot facility is very different than a facility that goes up to 68 feet. It's so wildly out of context with the code. Now, you said you disagree with the code, and that's your privilege. I have to look at implementing the code and make recommendations to assist if I think the code probably, there's a better way to look at this. So I think the entire structure, or the structures, or the activities, or the function that ends up trying to sort of end run the code, not with any malice, it's just this is the way you designed it. I can't support that as a commissioner, as a member of the planning board, because it isn't just a slight design element. It's part of the structure, as already been pointed out. It's significant. So it has to back off. That would be my own personal view. It has to back off. Now, the concept of the rooftop experience, again, that gets back to moral hazard in your business decision. There are hotels that don't have rooftop experiences. They may wish they did, and there's one in town that does, although it wasn't designed specifically for that purpose, it was sort of accidental. Here, you'd like to make it a little more formal. Well, if it doesn't have all this other stuff up there that's going up another 20-some feet, that may be a possibility. And it doesn't, as Bunky pointed out, you've got a lot of space and capability that you could in fact do and achieve a whole bunch of your goals. And it would still be a high-value venue. It may not have that one last piece that you desire. You came to us with a request, but I have to indicate that's your wish list and your want list. You ultimately have to make the decision, and it's your moral hazard as to what decision you want to make. But the public shouldn't have to be subject to the balance sheet. It's all on your balance sheet. It shouldn't be on theirs. They only benefit indirectly.
And and as I said earlier, I think it's a great plan. If it met code, it'd be wonderful. But kind of trying to make a decision in a vacuum on this one project, knowing that if we support it, then Grotto comes in next and says, I want to do the same thing, why don't you support me? Or anybody, so we're kind of trying to think of it in the context of the entire boardwalk, and any property that's subject to redevelopment will have a precedent and a good case to say, why not me? And I, I don't know whether that's an exercise of a code, a well thought out code modifications that have public input and where the code changes to where this would comply, or because and I think we're seeing that more and more these days of projects coming in asking for pretty big concessions, and some of them seem to make sense, some of them don't, but we're always thinking of them in the context of the bigger picture. Well, what if we say yes here? Will it be okay to say yes everywhere else? And that's kind of the stumbling block that I'm having difficulty with is.
Yeah, and one of the things I'm having difficulty with is say we did support it. We can't obligate the Board of Adjustment to go along. I mean, what's the criteria they're going to use? It's not. They have very specific criteria they're going to use, and they may say no. I mean, it sets you up for failure for us to send you to the Board of Adjustment to get something they may not meet their criteria.
I didn't think your support was controlling. I just thought at the end of the last meeting, you said, hey, if we have our support, you'll have a better chance, basably, of getting the Board of Adjustment.
That's true. I don't know if that's true here, because I don't know if that's true based on these elements.
No.
That may be true generally.
Experience with
Right.
And also, so the other thing I was looking at, and I agree with what Lee said about the underground parking, because we've seen this before, and I agree with when the previous applicant had said, it doesn't relate to bulk. I think that is a flaw in the code. But we also have the fact that the Board of Adjustment already gave on that. So we kind of know that that would be okay.
Sure.
But we don't know that anything else would be okay.
Well, they didn't give on the height.
No, I know, I'm talking about the underground parking. I'm
No,
talking about just
I-
the underground parking area, far area.
Well,
That's it. That's the only thing we know.
Our attempt today, the reason why we presented it this way is because we wanted to give an opportunity to be clear about what we were doing, okay? And also to frame it in a way that could potentially allow you to embrace it. And it's okay if you disagree with what we did, but that's why we're calling everything over 42 feet an architectural embellishment. Clearly, the reason why the elevator is 15 feet tall is because someone has to walk out the door in order to use the elevator, okay? And so once that happens, why are they doing that? To use the rooftop venue, right? Why are we putting the rooftop, the best part of the rooftop venue on the corner with the best view? Because we think it reinforces the character of the historic building. There's step-by-step logic behind what we're doing. We're not really trying to sugarcoat it. If you want to call it a fifth floor, we'll call it a fifth floor. But, you know, we were just using that language to help to be able to create a level of sense of continuity. Personally, I think that 5 floors is not the end of the world for a town like Rehoboth anywhere, okay? And so, especially in a commercial district that's supposedly, according to the CDP, to promote these kind of projects. So that's a separate issue.
Peter, let me offer maybe some random comments, although I have a reason for going where I'm going. First of all, I think you've done what we asked you to do, and whether you call it by one name or some other name, yes, you have presented a design that exceeds the code, and you have chosen to interpret it with words that perhaps would squeeze it into the code. The fact is, it still exceeds the code in mass.
Even, and we clearly say that.
And there's no argument.
22% and 68%.
And here is the struggle that I have, and I think it's the struggle that the city has, quite honestly. In 2 weeks, or 3 weeks, we are actually going to have a CDP workshop related to mixed-use housing in the commercial district. It's a subject that was brought up 10 years ago, needs to be brought up again, okay? And quite honestly, just as an observer, a city observer, if the city was to decide on an expansion of mixed-use housing, which we currently really do not have in the commercial district, in conceptually in the way most people would think about mixed-use housing. There's no question in my mind that it will call for, ultimately, the tear down of a significant portion of the buildings that exist in the commercial district, because they, in their present form, will not support, from a safety standpoint, from a design standpoint, the concept of mixed-use housing. And so, in my mind, going to the future, if that were to take place, if the city were to decide that that's where we want to go, it will result in a different-looking downtown, ultimately. My feeling, perhaps it's the engineer in me, is that rather than let that happen haphazardly, on a ones-off basis, this developer says, this is what I want to build, this developer says, this is what I want to build. My own feeling is that there should have been a master plan. We have proposed that before, whether it's an AIA program or supported by other people. You take a look at the whole downtown area. You take a look at it holistically, with the number of people that you're trying to support, with the size of the beach, whether there is erosion of the beach or a change of the beach relative to sea level rise or not. And you say, what is the town going to look like? And what do we want it to look like in the future? Not that we say building A has to look like this and building B has to look like this, but you develop a master plan with the concept of how people will use it, what people will use it, and where you want to go in the future. We have not done that as a city, unfortunately. Unfortunately. And it's penalizing you, and it's penalizing each individual group that comes forward and says, gee, today is when we really want to build. My feeling is that something will come out of that, these discussions, and we will have to make a fundamental decision. And I say the we, it's the collective we. It's not the Planning Commission, it's a much bigger we. Do we want larger sized buildings in Rehoboth? Do we want to change the nature of what those buildings are? Okay, and how the space is being used? We will have to answer the questions which unfortunately you don't have to face, or you're not facing at this point, is maybe the beach is going to be 150 feet further west in the next 50 years. because of sea level rise? We haven't answered that question yet. We need to talk about those things, which is very perplexing because here you are, or the Papa John family is willing to do something that may be impacted by things out of their control that aren't going to happen. And we haven't had those discussions. So I'm conflicted. The design itself is interesting, unique. I'm not convinced that whatever you call it, the venue on top is a good thing. Because I think one of the things you will find as I look at the mix of people that are out populating the beach during the summer, I think you will have a policing problem, a security problem of who gets in there. You will have a high-end hotel with people perhaps who you don't want running in saying, I want to go to the rooftop, or running down. So I think even though the rooftop venue sounds appealing, I think it is a perplexing problem relative to governing it and running it, and may not be the best use of space, quite honestly. So if it was up to me and I had to make a decision right now, I would give up on that aspect of it, because I really don't think, even though it may be a hot topic for hotels these days, I don't necessarily think it's necessarily the right thing for Rehoboth, and I think it poses more of a problem than you would like. I'd rather see you put the effort into the ballroom, the facilities that you know on a year-round basis you can make money on, and will bring people here as a destination. So if I had to start judging, my question to you is, what would you give up? To me, that's one of the things I would give up, and that would solve perhaps some of the height problem. Maybe not all of it, but some of it.
Right, Mr. Chairman, just to clarify, so your position is that we remove not just the so-called fifth floor structure, the finial pavilion as we call it, but just no activity at all on the roof?
I'm questioning whether that activity, although it sounds appealing, everybody wants to go up to the top of the Empire State Building, and take a look out. Not everybody does it. And I'm not convinced that throughout the year, that's the best place to put your money. It's hot right now. It seems appealing. Yeah, it's fantastic to go up and high and look down the boardwalk and see this way and that way. We've got a big hotel at the north end of the boardwalk, which has historically tried to bring people to the top, okay, through restaurants and
Yeah, we don't want that. No restaurants.
and it has not been particularly successful. Now, you can say it isn't successful because of the way they've done it, or it isn't successful because it's in the wrong place, or for a whole bunch of reasons. I think your spot is fantastic. But if I had to give up on something, I think I would give up on that portion of it, and I would make the year-round things more meaningful, and assure myself that people are going to come as a destination and use it that way. That's, again, a gut feeling. Furthermore, I have mixed feelings about creating something that's out of the significantly out of the code, and setting an example, because everyone, without a master plan, without knowing this is what the city really wants to do, not only here, but in other places.
Well, unfortunately, David, what I've seen is that I've done business in a lot of jurisdictions, and Peter has as well, so he knows. Typically what happens, you get a CDP approved, and then the next step is there's rezonings, or there's new zoning categories created to comply with the CDP. And people like Mr. Papa John lobby those that do it, because he owns a property and he says, I want to redevelop this one day, so why don't we work like 5 stories into the CDP, or greater FARs, or whatever he thinks he might need. It gets adopted, and then when he applies, he complies with the code. In Rehoboth, we've kind of missed that step. So what is your option then? You have to go to the Board of Adjustment, because they're the only ones that can grant a variance from the existing code, unless the commissioners create a new zoning category or do something else. And the Board of Adjustment, I thought was originally charged with just exceptional practical difficulties. When you had a funky situation, they could give you relief. Yeah, but now they've grown and now they're doing things like waiving heights and FARs and this, that, and the other, which is fine, you know, that's what they're doing. But I don't think they were intended to do that, and they wouldn't have had to do that if that middle step was there where the code was changed so that property owners could come in and it already been thought through and approved and it would go through much smoothly. It's just kind of the cart before the horse, and you're kind of stuck in that, unfortunately.
Yeah, because the CDP was approved in 2010.
Yeah, and
It's
nothing.
2019.
And we're working on the new one. It'll be
9
done.
years.
But nothing happened. There was a suggestion for cottage zoning or something, and nothing ever happened. I mean, there's suggestions, but it never goes the next step to create a code modification or something to
what's
make those things happen.
What's happened is the Board of Adjustment has become
Like
an agency of change as opposed to dealing with issues of unique difficulty.
Yeah.
And they don't look at things from a comprehensive plan perspective at all. They're not supposed to. And that then leads to a whole series of problems with decisions that may happen. And this is one of those situations where you've got a whole series of asks which go wildly out of context. And we're not there yet.
If you had more square footage available to you, could you do what you want economically at a lesser height with more square footage?
You mean land square footage?
Yeah, if you had more land square footage? Or is it economically,
If there was enough land, I guess the answer would be yes, but I really don't know. I'm not qualified to answer that. I really don't know. I haven't thought that through.
Rooftop venue is a separate thing than rooms. If you had more square footage, you'd build more rooms.
You build-
You'd still want to do a
You're always going
rooftop.
to max out.
It's two different ways.
yeah, there's a limit.
Because what happens is, you don't want to have a rooftop venue on the same floor as rooms. Like if you said, okay,
Yeah,
we're
we
gonna have
understand
the-
that.
Because you got all those people walking down the corridor making noise from the elevators. Whereas if they're on the roof, they're on the roof. So it's, although it is a fifth floor, it's really the roof. So it's, it's both. It's on top of the roof,
Yeah,
but it's a fifth
but just extending,
the fifth occupied floor, but it's on the
Walks
roof.
like a duck, quacks
Peter,
like a duck. it's supposed to-
extending that though, you probably want to have a separate elevator, which you don't have.
Well, we might, but we might not. In a little building like this, we may not need to. We'll lock off the room floors so that, if you're staying in a hotel, you'll only be able to, we use a keyed system to get off from floors. So there's security. In a building like this, such a public location, we may do something like that. And I'm sure that Ben does that on some of his properties already.
I'm not sure I understand. Was the rooftop, and I thought the rooftop venue was to be used for private functions. Are you saying it's going to be open to the public?
It'll be both. It'll be used, you'll be able to lease it, but it'll also be open to the public.
But when it's open to the public, you're not going to generate any revenue out of it, will you?
Correct.
Maybe indirectly, but not.
That's not, that happens all the time. And like the hotels in Richmond that I've been to, anybody can walk into the lobby, take the elevator, go up to the roof and chill out. That's not unusual.
I guess what I'm saying, losing the rooftop venue doesn't really change your economics very much.
Yeah, but Richmond is not a beach environment.
But there's still demand, and people love it.
It becomes a destination. More
Yeah, it really does.
People will buy something on the way and buy.
And they certainly have not had, at least to the best of my knowledge, any security issues at the hotels in Richmond that I'm familiar with that have the rooftop.
What could happen is it becomes too popular.
And it could.
That'd be good for us. Be good for the city, good for everyone.
But my instincts tell me your biggest objection is the structure on the roof. Perhaps maybe you'd be open-minded to having people walk on the roof, but just not the structure on the roof.
In which case, we need a 57-foot tall. Because you have 10 feet plus 5. Over plus 42 is 57. That's the way it works. Now.
Can't get there.
I don't know what to tell you. It's.
We got it. We appreciate it. We'll go do our job and see what happens. We'll be back one way or the other.
Well, can we hear from the public? Yeah, let's change venues a little bit. Jan, later. Later. Second. Yes, yes. I'm just penalizing my friend Jan. Your name and,
My name's Alison Blythe, and I'm the owner of the Go Fish building.
Right.
And I operate the restaurant out of it.
right,
And I came to the first meeting 2 meetings ago, and sorry, I missed the last one. I was in England visiting my family, so I'm not really up to speed on what went on that meeting. But anyway, so I've been thinking long and hard about this project, obviously, because I think of anyone, I mean, I have a year-round business. I've been committed to my year-round business the whole time I've been there, which is 17 years. I employ the youngest, the least tenure of any of my year-round employees is 6 years, going up to between 6 and 30 years, which is one of the employees that I brought from La La Land to Yum Yum and then to Go Fish in my 30 years of doing restaurants in Rehoboth. So I have really wonderful, loyal employees, and I can't imagine telling any one of them, I'm sorry, but you don't have a job this winter. But also, I can't imagine how I'm going to do business with the noise, dust, dirt, grime. I mean, it could be environmentally unsafe, structurally unsafe, and that's without the noise and everything. I mean, just even minor projects that have gone on around me. And at springtime, that whole ocean block is full of service vehicles that take up parking spaces. People are getting ready, opening their businesses for the summer. So you've got electric trucks, plumbing trucks, all of that. I mean, these people are going to have to get to work and somehow work on it. So there's our parking gone. And to start, I know Alex said probably September, but to start anything in the third quarter would be the kiss of death for me if I had to close my business up in the third quarter of the year. But anyway, I don't know if this is the meeting, from what I've been listening to, if it's a bit premature to voice my concerns. But overall, I mean, I do like this project. And my initial thing was, wow, that's going to be an extra so many parking spaces and potential customers for me and all the other people on the ocean block. But even just today, little things I've been thinking of that I didn't really think of beforehand. I mean, the parking spaces that are going to be needed to support the experience upstairs or the meeting room. I mean, unless these people are actually staying in the hotel, then that's going to be another parking spot on Rehoboth Avenue that's taking up. And so I have concerns about that as a business person. I mean, I remember in the days of La La Land, I used to stand on the street and I had customers would drive by, and we took reservations then, and they would say, I have a 7:30 reservation and I've been driving around for an hour and I'm sorry I have to cancel because there's nowhere to park. And that was 30 years ago. So I'm just saying it's the biggest issue for all of us is parking and who takes up those spaces. And we're all, the raising of the meters and the trying to move people in and out of parking spots, it's a project. I think maybe it's working or anything, but how are these people going to be running out every 20 minutes, half an hour, or an hour to plug their meters? I mean, I don't know if you've even thought about that, Alex, where they're going to park. But anyway, that's not really something I have to worry about too much. But so for me, first of all, it's loss of business, certainly in the summer months. There's no way that I can absorb my year-round employees in my other business because that goes down as well. Even though I'm on the highway, that goes down in the wintertime as well. So I have problems with loss of business and retaining my employees, and it's getting harder and harder. My salespeople come to me and say, you are so lucky, it's just a revolving door of staff out there in all these restaurants, and I don't want to lose my people. And I've taken care of them over the years, and they've taken care of me. I have structural concerns as well. I don't have a basement where I'm at, so butted up right to my building, literally where my booths are and people sit. We're going to be excavating down a whole floor to put parking next to me. So I think it would be wise on my part to get a structural survey done. I don't know how much they cost, but that's another expense for me. The other thing is my solar panel that solar panels that I put on my roof. I put them on in 2010, and it may be difficult to see from the street, but they go entirely back over my roof. They actually the equivalent of 200 ponderosa trees planted on there is the energy savings that I'm. So what's happening is now the shade issues that I had initially when I put that on, I had shade issues from my neighbor on the east. So I pitched that on a superstructure. And so that was an engineering feat in itself and extremely expensive. So that was a $160,000 investment for me. And it wasn't so much the solar panels, but the superstructure that holds that on and lifts that up. Because I was told at the time, if you just put those on your roof with the shade issues, with the building to the east of you being 1 story high, you're not going to get any sun until high noon. Whereas now I get sunshine. Those solar panels are equal to the highest building. I start to get them probably about 9:30 in the morning, even earlier than that. So my energy savings, which I'm using to offset my investment, are going to be cut in half. And my renewable energy credits will be cut in half because I just won't be generating them. The cost of taking that down or even pitching it even higher, another 3 floors, to be where I'm at now is just prohibitively expensive for me. So I have, obviously from an investment point of view, it devalues my building as well. And I mean, when I bought my buildings, I bought them to pass it along to my son and his family. So I have chosen over the years to reinvest a lot of the money that I've generated from my restaurant, plus the loans I've gotten to renovate the apartment. I have a beautiful apartment upstairs now. It's upward of $600,000 on top of the initial purchase of the building. I mean, I'm encumbered by another 6 years left on my mortgage, which I'm happy about. And then, after that, I guess it's going to be a lot easier for me. But anyway, the loss of business on the winter time for this building project going on is a big concern for me. So then there's another just small minor things. I noticed that there's the overhang on the balconies slopes down toward my building, almost touches it. I don't know if there's going to be any kind of a gutter system, because that could potentially just run right onto the side of my concrete block building, which is porous to a point. And then also to run down just right on the top of my solar panels. So, I mean, I guess a simple guttering thing would take care of that, but that is something I did want to mention. And then my apartment in the back, I just realized, delivery trucks are going to be backing up to that. My apartment is literally right above my kitchen. And when those delivery trucks come in and they back up, they have to alert people. So they've got this beeping going on. And they come at 4 and 5 in the morning, delivery trucks. So I don't know how that's going to impact my ability to rent the apartment out because my bedrooms are in the back of the building. So, but anyway, I put a $150,000 investment into my apartment to make it a beautiful apartment, and I rent it out during the week in the summertime and generally get an off-season renter in there, and that helps for me to pay that loan and pay the mortgage. So I think that kind of wraps it up. I mean, overall, again, I don't dislike the project. Presentation was really nice. I thought my store stood out quite well, actually, going down the street, I've got to say. So, I think down the road, I could benefit from it. I do have issues with Joe Public going in there, and I just want to say, and I've actually said this to Alex before, I'm glad that you didn't go with that open veranda type, because people come, they drop those day trippers off at the bandstand, they bring the show on the road, they bring coolers, they don't want to spend $10 on a fish and chips, they don't want to spend $2 on a soda, they come in all day long to use my bathroom. Every night I'm sweeping out. You can't be mean to people, because they could be a potential customer, and you don't want your customers sitting behind you telling you can't come in. I mean, I try and say there's bathrooms over there, and that was a big help when they moved the bathrooms back a little bit, because it was hard for people to say. But they'll come in, they'll take ketchup off my tables and put them on the Thrasher's French fries. I mean, it's just, and it's just honestly gotten worse over the years. I've sat at that takeout counter now for 15 years. And I did say to Alex, we're good neighbors. Don't let Joe Public go on that balcony thing. And you can't weed all people out. You can't pick and choose who comes in. So I just think that's going to be a problem, quite honestly. I mean, I think a wedding where you have, you know, people are obviously going to spend the money. Obviously, you're going to get a good tenant, a good group of people coming in, and you're going to make the money on food and beverage, and that it's another food and beverage option for people on that ocean block. Is it competition? That could be argued as well. But certainly the parking as well, and even on the off-season, parking's really hard for us. So it's a year-round problem for us, the parking. So I think there's good and bad as far as I'm concerned with this project. But I did want my concerns to be, I did want to mention them. I didn't know if now was the right time. I'm sorry to take up any more of your time, but I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Jan?
Jan Conacy, 42 Oak Avenue, Rehoboth Beach. First of all, I want to say I loved La La Land, but I walked there. And my mother-in-law, who's 105, loves Go Fish. And as soon as the season's over, we will bring her down from Dover to have her fish sandwich. So what I wanted to say, first of all, I want to start off by saying never in my wildest dreams did I ever think I would be defending building codes in South Florida. But I cannot let what Mr. Falat said go by. My family has been in the architectural and development business in South Florida since the 50s. My 2 kids live in West Palm Beach, and I can assure you, if people think building codes in Rehoboth Beach are tough, let them go to South Florida and try to build something. And that includes big development projects like the Broward County Courthouse and homes in residential neighborhoods. They are not fly-by-night builders in South Florida. End of that. Secondly, the history. I don't know how old Mr. Falat is. My oldest son is 45 years old. And the Belmore was gone long before he was here. My husband was born, has been here since the 50s. I've been here since 72. So I don't know what year it was torn down, but the bulk of the people who live in Rehoboth and come to Rehoboth don't know any history of the Belmore. The Historical Society has it, but I would imagine that most people have never seen it, even thought, my husband knows about it, but he's been here since 1952.
You mean the Belhaven, right?
Sorry, Belhaven. I'm sorry, Belhaven. Getting my bells mixed up.
No worries.
Belhaven. I'm trying to be fast.
Got a bell in it.
Right. The other thing is, I haven't been to one of these presentations before, but I did see on the live streaming and actually the notes that Ann posted prior to this meeting. And I just have to comment about the reference to Disney World. Rehoboth Beach is not Disney World. Nobody lives in Disney World. I used to attend marketing conferences in Disney World, and you know where they're held? Underground. Because under all of Disney World is an underground. They bring the trash from underground, the Snow White pops up from underground. We don't have that in Rehoboth. We have trash man on the boardwalk. We have Cisco bringing deliveries up and down the streets all the time, Dogfish Head parking beer trucks everywhere. We have people who live in this town, and Disney doesn't. When Disney is full, they close it. I mean, if you've ever been there, when they said, you know, Walt Disney closed, come back at 8 o'clock at night, or you watch these neon signs around, they close it. This is not Disney World. This is a living, breathing community with a fire hall, a library, a post office. We are small town America. And people come here and they talk about the boardwalk when they were kids, going to Funland when they were kids. They can't wait till they have their kids grow up enough and have grandchildren to go to Funland. We need to preserve our neighborhoods. Everybody has strong opinions about Rehoboth Beach. And you have land here and you want to maximize your land. But I will tell you this article that has been referred to earlier, and you probably know Norman, you knew Norman Shagru, or your father does. Okay. So Norman Shagru was a businessman and a realtor in Rehoboth. And he and his wife are good friends of my husband and I. And his kids are businessmen and women in Rehoboth now. And Norman wanted building heights to be, what was it, 30? I'm trying to read. It was either 35 feet. Now, Norman was a businessman with a lot of business interest in Rehoboth and real estate in Rehoboth. But he saw the vision. And the towns that have the most restrictive ordinances building ordinances, are the towns that are the most successful towns. When you look at Georgetown, I wouldn't compare Richmond with Rehoboth. Richmond is a major U.S. city. You can't even compare what goes on there with what goes on in Rehoboth Beach. So to do so is to me inappropriate, just like comparing South Florida with Rehoboth Beach. There's no comparison. But I will say, talking about so even back in the 80s, people were still talking about building heights. Building heights are crucially important to Rehoboth because we have a bulk and a scale, and the scale is important. It's been addressed, frankly, although we didn't redo the code, and I'm sure Mr. Falat is familiar with the DPZ, Andre Dwarning and Liz Plater-Zyberg, who've done Rosemary's Beach and done downtown renovations all over Florida, England, Europe, everywhere. I brought them to Rehoboth in the 90s, but we couldn't get anybody except builders and architects interested. Everybody came out. But there are firms like that will do that master plan that David was talking about. They will come in and they will look, and I know Patrick Gossett has tried, and I have tried over the years to bring them to town. And we really need to do that. Not because I think they're going to tell us you can have real tall buildings. I think they're going to give us the framework to maintain that nostalgic charm that brings people here, that makes them pay the highest rental rates, where our rental rates in Rehoboth Beach are higher than they are in North Carolina. And people come here for that. We have not done a master plan. However, since the last CDP, we have had referendums when things have gotten out of hand beyond what the residents can say. Every referendum to reduce building size in this town has passed. And it's passed by the residents who are reducing it in their own neighborhoods because of the impact in our neighborhoods on oversized houses and the traffic that they bring in. Every referendum has passed, and they've all been hard fought. There has not been a single one that reduces building size in this city that has failed. So they weren't in the commercial district, but if you chose to build a residence in the commercial district, it would matter. So those are the things that I wanted to say. I just felt to compare us with Disney World is really a joke. And to compare us with Richmond, it really isn't appropriate either. But if you haven't picked up a beachcomber, I'll give Terry Plowman a little pat on the back here. If you haven't picked up a beachcomber, and my friend who was behind me, when I told him you have to go to Browse About, he thought I meant browse about the town. And he said, but where? I said, Browse About. And then somebody said, no, that's the bookstore. $4.95, and it has a really interesting history of heights. People say to me, somebody came door to door who's running for office, and he absolutely knew nothing about the city. I said, why do you think we don't have high buildings? I don't know. Nobody wanted to build them. No, actually, read this article. Why do you think our restaurants are the size they are? Why we don't have Phillips Crab House or the Rusty Rudder in the middle of downtown Rehoboth? I don't know. Well, we passed an ordinance. It was intentional. Why do you think we're not a bar town? Why do you think we don't have Bottle and Cork in the middle of downtown Rehoboth? Because we passed an ordinance banning bars in 1989. So things are intentional. People work hard and they intend to get these things done. And a lot of times they don't start until things get out of hand, like some of the referendums around pools did, got out of hand in the neighborhoods. But if we start allowing 68 feet tall buildings, architectural embellishments, give me a break. That's a weather vane on top of your building maybe. But it's a beautiful building, but it's just not fit for that corner. And if you go to the bandstand, I went to the bandstand last Saturday night to see Elvis, and it was mobbed. And I imagined a 57-foot story hotel on the corner there. When you're sitting in the audience there looking out, you don't see the ocean anymore. What you're seeing is the hotel. Thank you very much.
Hey, Jen.
Hi, my name is Kathleen Allen, and I came off the beach today on
Where do you
vacation.
live?
I live in Annandale, Virginia, Northern Virginia. I will say that my husband and I just bought a condo here in September. It's a lifelong dream of mine to be able to be here. But this is our one vacation week, and they left the beach, and I was hoping to join them again. But anyway, I am not a public speaker. It's hard for me to, I'm shaking up here talking, but I really felt like my family's kind of up in arms about all of this. I've been coming to Rehoboth since I was born in 1965, from Ohio, from Marietta, Ohio. This is the beach where we came with our family every year on vacation. And we went to Funland, and we love this town. And I live in Northern Virginia now and raise my family there, and my children have come here since they were born. This is a town. It's a small town with quaint little buildings, and it's just a beautiful city. This nice boardwalk, nice building shops, and the buildings are all quaint and nice little different, characteristics, architectural, style and beauty. I look at your hotel. It's a beautiful hotel. It is, and I appreciate the history. I love the history of it, although it was, I don't know the Belmore. I was born in '65,
Belhaven.
I'm sorry. So the Belhaven. But sorry. It's just, like the last woman, you're sitting, I like the old fountains, but the new gazebo thing is very nice. That's here, Rehoboth evolved and it made a beautiful thing, but it's, you look and the height of this building, the gazebo, the centerpiece sort of the town, the gathering space, it's going to be this little outbuilding, that's, dwarfed by this huge hotel. And, and I think, well, what about Candy Kitchen, where I went? And what about the ice cream store and all these little shops along the way? I don't know, maybe they'll be there. I'm not sure. I can't tell from the place. But the rates will go up. Who knows if you can afford to rent there anymore, And it's like somebody up here, I know nothing about the politics here, although I did register to vote this week because of this issue. I got my absentee ballot, so I have some studying to do. And my husband too. It's fine to revitalize the town. I look, these buildings are old. I mean, my gosh, Gus's has been there with the potato hanging like it used to hang. And the buildings are old, and I see that there's, at some point, maybe something needs to be renovated or changed, but maybe there does need to be some type of master plan, I don't know, so that, we don't you lose the character of this wonderful town. These, it's all the individual businesses. I know nothing about the politics or the business owners. I have nothing against you. And I appreciate, the attempts that have been made, and, some things look very beautiful, but, and you keep, you display the picture of the old, Belhaven Hotel, it looks like it's 2 stories to me. So I was thinking if we could have the picture back up, we could see, I think it's 2 stories. And, and it still would seem kind of massive there, but, it wouldn't be towering above. So, as you walk down, you get your ice cream at night, and, it's just these little shops, different character roofs, and, and everything. And I just can't imagine something that's big and huge and massive towering above, the city. So I just, beg of you to come up with something that works. I mean, you deserve to have something that works too. But like, I think that what it's doing is taking away from the charm of this town. Walking the boardwalk, going into Candy Kitchen, going to the ice cream store, listening to the bandstand. Like if I'm at the bandstand, then it's like all hotel, and that just is not appealing. And so, I think that the height restrictions that I'm learning about in the town, you know, okay, maybe 4 stories if you go out to the sides, but like the main drag, 4 stories, that's, you know, that's a lot. And it just, you know, breaks my heart to think that, you know, that this town that I've been coming to for my life and that my kids are coming to, and they're in college now, and they hope to bring their kids, you know, and that's what we have. We have multi-generational families coming because of Funland that, you know, has been just, you know, is just this wonderful place out of the ages for people to come. So I just hope that in your master plan and your CDP or whatever it is that I'm going to read about and vote on, you know, that you take into consideration the charm and the character and the heart and the essence of what this town is for people who come from out of town and stay for the week.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Can we make a shameless plug?
For what, for the CD?
The CDP, or you are aware of the fact that we have a survey relative to the CDP that we invite all visitors, citizens, everybody to participate in, and we invite you to do that.
Just saw it when I
Gotcha.
Great.
Just,
It's
you're-
long. It'll take you a while.
It'll
but
take you a
stick
little
with
bit,
it.
but
It's a lot of important questions.
if you're willing to come here on a Friday afternoon, you're willing
Yeah,
to do
right.
that.
Okay,
Thank you.
let's-
Thank you for
Let's get
coming.
back to the task at hand. Where do we go?
Yeah, I was just going to ask you that. Where do we go from here?
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman?
I'm saying, where do we go from here?
Oh, I'm sorry. Sure.
I think you have a sense that scale is a major problem. And I think you got to think hard about what's the most important part of this economic adventure, you know, to make it pay. Obviously, I think there's general support that it's a good project. I mean, having the hotel, trying to incorporate the things that you're trying to incorporate, making it a destination, I think all of those things are good. It's really a question of scale. But it's got to balance the economics too. And I think it will be a real push. My sense is it would be a real push to get that kind of approval from the Board of Adjustment. I just have that sense. I mean, we can't predict what they'll do, but I think you've got a sense that the scale is too big.
So can we dig into the scale just a bit? Are we talking about that 5th floor finial pavilion? Or are you talking about the square footage of the rooms, the patios?
No, I think I get the sense that you're on the right. You're on the right target for the size of the rooms. That it makes it upscale. I mean, the whole discussion about where you fit in this hotel hierarchy, those things are good. I think it's the things that make the mass too much, and it's basically the height.
Yeah, basically, the other thing I was going to say, David, is I think we're talking about room size. That really is under your control and your personal decision-making economically of what you would like to achieve. I mean, if you made the room smaller, bigger, added more rooms, made several rooms bigger, smaller, that's your prerogative to do whatever you want. I mean, you're the business person investing into it. That's your hazard that you take, both good or bad, and not a decision that we have really any input on. If it meets the code, it meets the code. I think that the height and the context of the height and what things are being called and how you arrived at that is problematic. And I think if you were to create a similar aesthetic that met the code from the standpoint of the height restrictions and use of embellishment and finial and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, I think that would go a long way.
Okay.
You know, basically, if we took off the rooftop and the venue and both the interior and the exterior, that equals about 1.3 FAR. It still puts us, I'm sorry, 0.13 FAR. it still puts us over the FAR by about right now we're about 2. It would take us to 2.3.
Is that after you've,
Is that after you've taken the parking
parking
lot
out? If you assume
Oh,
the
yeah.
parking is not part of the FAR?
Yeah.
That's the real,
Took the roof off.
It brings it down by 0.13, puts them at 2.37.
Okay.
And the parking?
No, that's without the parking.
That's without the parking.
Without the parking. And
That's
so
all
it brings it to what,
2.37,
2.37.
as opposed to 2.0?
no, as opposed to 2.5.
2.5.
Our ask.
Your ask.
2.3.
7 is now what would be their wish list if they took the roof part off.
But if you go back to, I hate to be repetitive, but if you go back to option A that you presented to us last month, without the parking garage, doesn't that meet the FAR requirement?
No, because it didn't have the meeting venue.
3 points, oh, Jesus.
It did not have the meeting venue.
Right.
Yeah.
That's,
And the meeting room really is integral in the economic.
it's another part of that
It-
economic
Yeah.
menu. Yeah, it's really important. Yeah.
So in essence, you're still,
Still over. yeah.
You're still over, you're still over.
even if we,
because-
even with the parking
Right,
accommodated.
right.
Yeah, see, that's why we quantified it the way we did, so
Yeah,
you
yeah.
can see that if you, it's all there, black
Right.
and white. Something to think about.
What about the business about the overhangs adding to FAR? Didn't you say that? The porch coverings would added to FAR?
So when we meet with the Board of Adjustments,
Okay.
we're going to be asking for certain things to be included in the FAR and certain things to not be included in the FAR.
Right.
So the things that we're asking to not be included in the FAR will be the parking, will be the covered balconies,
The covered balconies, that's what I'm saying.
and the pool. Okay,
Okay.
all those items, and they're here. So if you look on this list, the asterisk items
Yeah.
are what we're saying, we agree should be included in FAR, and they equal over the 2.0 FAR.
So what's the plan for that? I mean, assuming they go along with the ones you want to be excluded, you're still over, so you want them to go along with what you want to exclude plus
Yes,
0.37 more?
it'll be a separate ask.
Okay,
It'll be a separate request.
okay.
So it's
That's a tall, just based on.
no question about it.
I've seen it.
That plus the roof venue, we're, like you said, shooting for the stars,
Yeah, yeah.
so we can see them better.
And what's,
And I'm going to give you that number on the height of that building, I promise.
and what is Plan D if they don't go along with that?
Yeah, it's a tall order for them.
That's going to be to be determined.
To be determined.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, we would like to convince the Papa Johns to redevelop this project. I mean, it'd be a great thing, rather than to see to leave what's here for the next generation. It would be nicer to do that, to have something new than not. And in terms of like the Candy Kitchen, Mr. Papa John, you haven't been at the past ones. When we're showing Grotto's coming back, we're showing Candy Kitchen on the corner, we're showing the ice cream shop, so the intention is there's a continuity of the vendors in the city on that corner, which is a pretty big thing. It's a big commitment.
We don't know where they're going in the meantime, right? Is there?
They'll go
Are
to
they
their
planning to stay?
suburban
We've been in touch.
locations.
Okay, so they're,
They'll go to the suburban locations.
We've been in touch with all of them. They understand the possibility we may do this project, the likelihood. Our hope is they only miss one season. That's our
there
hope.
are other, I would assume there are other storefronts in town they could maybe go to temporarily, I don't know, but.
I can't answer for them, but most of them that I have talked to, they want to come back. They want to come back.
I would think so.
Yeah.
Good location.
Yeah.
The important thing is that Alex and John want them to come back.
Yeah.
That's the most important thing.
No,
Alex, I don't know if it's even proper to ask this question, but Dr. Treos was here, and there was some discussion at the first meeting that maybe you could work together. Is that out of the question? Is that not even considered?
Right now, really not considering that, yeah.
Okay.
I think,
Because that provides an integral portion of square footage that could be advantageous.
true,
Okay.
true. I
Yeah.
agree.
Okay, all right. That's not, obviously,
This is
that's
not
not,
simple.
but it was brought up.
Or
I
it could
understand.
create that venue, a pub overlooking the water.
Absolutely.
Off of the second level
Yeah.
on the water.
Yeah.
You know, so I mean, would certainly, in that regard, but it's not on the table, we just don't have that dialogue.
By the way, there were some questions. Peter, maybe you're probably the one that can answer this. Actually, Dr. Trejos had raised questions about access, emergency access. He was worried about the narrow walkways. Have you gone any further on that? Do we?
We did not get a chance to meet with the fire marshal, but
Okay.
in meeting with Dom and the other city officials,
Okay.
we did learn that the boardwalk is capable of holding a fire truck. And so the building is able to be fought by a fire on 3 sides
Okay.
at the street. And typically that's adequate. We don't anticipate, and we'll work with the fire marshal, but typically that's not something that's allowed to be contemplated.
And how about the issues of groundwater and sea level rise? Have you gone any further on that yet?
We have not, but obviously we'll design a building.
Okay. Have you talked with the Sussex Conservation District yet?
No, not yet.
Stormwater plan?
No, it hasn't been developed that.
Okay.
Yeah, there will be parts of this building that'll have living roofs, I'm sure. We're showing one on top of the ballroom, we're showing it in parts of the other buildings. That'll help mitigate that.
Mr. Chairman, based on the rules, and I wasn't sure if I should ask you or Mr. Mandelis, but are we in time to present our project to the Board of Adjustment in late August?
And what's their submission requirements for board? Is it 20 or 30 days in advance? 30 days in advance. So materials have to be to Ann 30 days in advance of the board hearing. The board meets the third Monday. So yes, I mean, if you got something in within a week or so, you.
Fourth Monday, that's right.
Fourth Monday.
I'm sorry, fourth
Fourth
Monday.
Monday.
So we have about 2 weeks, maybe?
Yeah.
Okay, all right, thank you. Thank you very much.
I don't know what their agenda is, so.
So they meet the 26th.
Maybe the 26th.
Yeah. Right. I don't know whether, perhaps Ann could tell you whether they actually have space on the agenda that they'd be willing to take. One is the timing that you have to have.
I see.
And secondly is whether they have space on an agenda. That's up to them.
I understand. Okay, thank you. I just want to thank this whole board for your time, for your feedback. We've had 3 meetings. They've all been excellent. Really appreciate it. Our family does want to build a very high-quality, modern luxury hotel that brings in those upscale destination vacationers. And we're really hoping we can deliver something, and I appreciate all of your feedback. We're going to take today's meeting, go back, chat about it. We'd like your support, and I'm hoping that the iteration of the project that we present to the Board of Adjustment is that one, so.
Okay.
Really am. Thank you so much.
We hope your mother is okay, too.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Appreciate that. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on. I have,
You have a CDP update from Debbie?
yes, hot off the press.
Pretty interesting one, too.
Yeah, we asked Debbie this morning, in the middle of the night, maybe it was, I forget exactly when it was, for an update on, well, let me just say that the survey, I think everybody knows the survey has been launched.
Right.
Okay, with suitable publications, publicity. It will be further publicized. You're going to send something to the homeowners.
Yes, and I haven't done it yet, only because I have to get the announcement out first for our workshops, and I was waiting till after the 4th to do
Okay,
all of that.
okay,
So
so,
it will be going out.
but, so we asked Debbie this morning if there's any feedback so far on the survey, so she sent us some statistics, which are sort of interesting. not actual feedback on the answers to the questions, but how many people have actually taken the survey. For the community survey, which has 46 questions, which a lot of people have said is too much, typical time is 27 minutes time spent filling it out, okay? There have been 412 responses.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's great.
That's,
Yeah.
and here's the catch, a 68% completion rate. The question was raised by Susan, well, actually, several of us have raised the question. A, can you start the survey, go away, and come back? And the answer, unfortunately, is no, at least at this time. B, if you do not fill it out completely, does it count? And it does, okay? So that 68% says that 68% has actually been completed, okay? And some people have not answered all questions, et cetera, et cetera. And we don't know the nature of the answers.
So we should have all the important questions in the front.
Yeah.
Right.
For the visitor survey, there were 29 questions. 7 minutes is a typical time spent. There's been 237 responses. Most of this over 237 for the visitors, and it had an 81% completion rate.
Which is very consistent with what Debbie told us all along, that the fewer the questions, the higher the response rate.
Yeah,
So-
yeah, which is sort of interesting. And most of this was over the July 4th weekend.
Right.
Okay, and it was launched just slightly before the July 4th weekend. For the business survey, 34 questions, 12 minutes is the typical time spent. There's been 48 responses and 69% completion rate. And the highest participation dates were July 4th to July 7th. So that's just an update, okay? And we need to publicize it, you know, tell friends, tell people.
Yeah.
But people are looking at it, so that's good. And I don't know the split, well, we probably don't know the split. I think this reflects all of the electronic submissions. It probably does not reflect any paper editions. Okay.
But one thing that I thought was interesting is I asked her about, if you know the pages of it. First of all, some people have asked that we should go back in and put like how far along you are, because people don't know it's 46 questions, so they get to question 20 and they wonder how much longer do I have? And there's nothing that tells them. That's one thing. But what I was pleased to hear is I know you can skip questions, but I thought you had to go all the way to the end and hit submit before anything was counted, and that's not true. When you hit next on each page, what you've done before that has
Gets
gone
stored,
over.
gets
Yeah.
stored.
So that's good. So people that want to only do part of it, they can just leave at any time, and what they've done so far gets counted.
Yeah, the only bad thing, I beg your pardon?
Not after. Well, I've gone back. I went back when I did it, yeah.
Yeah, you can go back, but you can't exit
Once
and go
you
back
exit
in.
out, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of surveys where you can exit and go back in, and unfortunately, it isn't set up that way. So that's just a piece of information,
Very encouraging.
okay? Agenda, where's the?
David, this isn't on the agenda. I don't know if I can ask it or not. Was there any update on clear space?
On
Clear space?
Who will?
Clear space.
Clear space.
Nothing on clear space.
Nobody knows anything?
Nothing on clear
Unless
space.
Glenn knows anything. No?
Where did I just lost,
Okay, I got it. Let's see. It
oh,
says,
I lost the agenda. Okay, now I have it in front of me.
so the workshops.
Workshops, we have 2 workshops scheduled. Chris put out some publicity yesterday. I went over and worked with her. Susan had worked with her a little bit. I went and worked with her for an hour or so, and then that resulted in the publicity for the 2 upcoming workshops. Okay, so hopefully we'll get some people in. The first one will be on the 20th. We'll start at 9 o'clock in the morning here. And it will be with, Tony Pratt is coming from ex-Denrec, and the discussion will relate to sea level rise, impact, environmental issues, impact on Rehoboth, et cetera.
Is he going to give a presentation?
No, he isn't, and that's a little bit disappointing. I thought he was, and no, he's going to bring his expertise in his head. So I thought what I would do is we would present, bring up the NOAA software and show the NOAA software, show what's available on the software, because everybody ultimately goes back to the NOAA data. Okay, so we've got it, we can get at it, we'll bring it up, it's interactive. So you can look at so many feet sea level rise and find out what's flooded, what's not flooded. And there's a private company that essentially deals with the NOAA data, but carries it a step further, and it has some economic impact, it has some social impact, et cetera, on your particular area. So it's sort of interesting, and I'm sure Tony can give us a lot of help on that. So that's on the 20th. And on the 3rd, we're going to have a mixed use, that's on a Saturday morning at 9 o'clock. 9 o'clock, Ann? Yes, 9 o'clock. And that will be on mixed use, potential mixed use zoning downtown in the commercial district. And Pat Cluzy is going to help us with that, because she's done a lot of studying and work on that. So we're trying to advertise those, and our job is basically to listen, not to tell, and it'll be interesting. So, okay, that's city solicitor. What have you got to report to us?
Nothing major to update, although I was asked about Beach Walk. So what's occurred with Beach Walk most recently is, if you recall, the court said there was not a right of appeal on the issue of whether the condominium act applies to this sort of a project. So what's occurred since that ruling is that the commissioners adopted an ordinance clarifying that when they passed the previous ordinance limiting one structure per lot, they passed an ordinance now that has clarified that that ordinance was intended to apply to any pending applications. Well, at the time, the Beach Walk application was pending. So because of their recent adoption of this ordinance clarifying, now the Beach Walk litigation team has filed an action in the Court of Chancery challenging that determination or that clarifying ordinance, making the Beach Walk application subject to the one structure per lot ordinance. So they filed now a petition in Chancery Court. That petition seeks a declaratory judgment that the ordinance does not apply to them. It also has a vested rights claim, which basically says we've spent enough money and done enough time, done enough effort that you can't apply this new ordinance to us. And also an equitable estoppel claim, which is similar to vested rights, which basically says I relied upon statements and the code at the time, and now you can't apply something new against me. So we're back in court on Beach Walk for another round, and you all,
Who knows?
it's not coming to you anytime real soon. So there it is.
Okay.
Sure.
Yeah.
Is there anything, have we heard anything on the third hotel, that negotiation going on?
On state?
Yeah.
So there is an application has been made to change the zoning on the portion that is residential, the back portion that's residential. That, I presume, is going to get referred to you all at some future commissioners meeting. I guess it'll likely be on the commissioners' workshop meeting next month, and then referred during their regular meeting, I would guess. So
it's not going to come here at all, right? It doesn't come to us.
it likely will come to you. Usually on a rezoning request, the commissioners will refer to you for a recommendation on whether to rezone it or not.
Okay.
And that's by the applicant?
I have not actually reviewed the package yet, but but
with or without the support of the landowner?
That's going to be the interesting question. So that may have to get resolved before it makes it here.
Right.
But it has been filed it was filed, by the way, by David Hutt, who, if I recall correctly, represents the tenant, not the owner. So we'll figure all that out. Hopefully it'll come, when it comes to you, it won't have any of those thorns.
Where?
I'm sorry?
It's been filed where? With the city?
With the city.
Okay.
Okay.
That's interesting that the tenant can, even though he's being sued by the
Right.
by the landlord.
Right. I'm sure there's more to all of this thing, and I'll figure it out well before it gets here, but yes.
It does get interesting. Okay. Is that it?
That's it, thanks.
That's it. Thank you. Future Planning Commission meetings, August.
August 9th.
August 9th, and we'll have a public hearing. Well, we got a public hearing. We'll have to hear if we've got anything new from Belhaven. And we have anything else, Ann?
Well, and, well, I invited Jessica, I don't know if she can come or not. I
Oh,
invited
yeah.
Jessica Watson from the Sussex County Conservation District to come and talk to us about the timing and the criteria for their stormwater reviews that they do on large projects. So I don't think it would take more than half an hour even in discussion, but I'm not 100% sure she can do it. But
Probably 1 o'clock, I suspect, if we're going into a public hearing for Baltimore.
As just a process question, do we go through the 21 criteria first and then hear from the public? Is that how the public hearing works? Okay, so we discuss each one of those points?
Or the ones that are applicable.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yep. Or any others that we might think of.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, on the Sussex County Conservation District, their rules call for the submission to the Sussex County Conservation for review of any lot of 5,000 square feet or more. And does that apply to every house, every 5,000 square foot house?
You've got to disturb 5,000 square feet or more. So I think that in a tear down redevelopment, probably.
They're slightly less.
Well, but Kevin told me yesterday you all are working on an ordinance to have that be 2,500 feet here, so that it would apply to basically any new construction. Any new construction here. So I think that's a great development.
In addition to that, one of the bigger issues that we're having, or complaints, is dust control.
Yeah.
Oh, excuse me, yeah. One of the other issues that we're facing is continuous complaint about dust control.
Huh, interesting.
Let's see how that progresses.
Yeah.
If, going back to the Sussex County Conservancy, if they were to review, for instance, when we did Oak Grove, they wouldn't even look at the property until essentially the final build was there. Because they didn't know how much open land, how much built land was there, what the topography was going to be. Is that still the rule, or will they look at it early in the game?
I couldn't answer that. I don't know the answer to that.
If you're talking with any of them, well, we'll ask
That's
her
why-
to.
it's one of the
Yeah,
reasons
it's
I
one of the
wanted to come
reasons
here.
we'd sort of like her to come
Yeah.
and talk to us about that.
Right.
Because that sort of makes a difference of how you handle subdivisions and things like that. Okay.
Yeah, we have
Jan's here,
Jan
but she can't make a motion, so.
We still call it a Jan, he still calls it a Jan motion. Yeah.
Can we have a motion to, anybody have anything else to? Anybody else? Anything?
Nope.
Okay.
No.
A motion to,
I move we adjourn.
second?
I would like to second that.
All in favor? Say aye. Thank you all.
So I think